many? Do you have to do alt 9 or just F9? Lincoln City Council meeting
Volunteer, you should get no reason.
of the 5th of March, 2018. Let's all rise for a pledge of allegiance, followed by a period of silent meditation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. In accordance with LB 898, a copy of the Open Meetings Act is posted at the back of the chamber. The order of business of the City Council is as follows. The clerk will call the items listed on the agenda under public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak on an item should come forward after the clerk reads that item. The applicant and those in favor should speak first, then those opposed. The applicant may then make one short rebuttal. Each speaker should begin by stating name, address, and whether you're speaking in favor or in opposition to the item. Testimony is limited to 5 minutes per speaker. After all public hearings, the council will vote on resolutions listed under third reading. On the second and last meetings of the month, immediately prior to adjournment, anyone may speak on any issue not on the agenda for that date nor planned for a future agenda. Will the clerk please read the first item?
Yes, our first item is our public hearing consent agenda, items 1 through 8.
Is anyone here to speak on any of these items? Next item.
If not, we can vote on these items. Item 1 was introduced by Gaylor Baird.
So moved. Second?
Moved by Larry and seconded by Jane. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb? Yes. Motion carried 7-0. Items 2 and 4 through 6 were introduced by Raybold.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Jane, seconded by Carl. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0. Next then are our public hearing liquor resolutions. Those giving testimony are asked to come forward, raise their right hand for the clerk to administer the oath. After the oath, witnesses shall state their names and addresses. I'll call items 9 and 10 together. They're the application of Plum Crazy Lounge for a Class C liquor license at 7301 South 27th Street, Suites 150, 160, and 170, and the related manager application of David Stoke.
Is there anyone here to speak on this? Please come forward.
Would you raise your right hands? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you verily believe it to be?
Yes,
Thank you. Just state your names and addresses.
I'm David J. Stocky, 1620 Susan Circle, Lincoln, Nebraska.
Barbara A. Stocky, 1620 Susan Circle, Lincoln, Nebraska.
David C. Stocky, 1101 Cambridge Court, Apartment 43, Lincoln, Nebraska.
Okay, tell us about your application.
We're hoping to open up a new bar lounge here in South Lincoln. It was the old Cavo Bar years ago. Our plan is just to make a nice neighborhood bar. We're going to put in a golf simulator, dartboard, that sort of thing. We're hoping to introduce maybe a wine club once or twice a month.
Okay. Questions? Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
All right, next are items 11 and 12. They're the application of CJ's Neighborhood Bar and Grill for a Class I liquor license at 200 West P Street, Unit 2, and the related manager application of Carrie DeFries. Would you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you verily believe it to be?
Yes.
Thank you. Just state your name and address.
Carrie DeFries, 1109 West Britt Drive, Lincoln, Nebraska, 68521.
Tell us about your application.
I am purchasing CJ's Neighborhood Bar and Grill. It's at 200 West P, formerly Sun Valley Bar and Grill, Shooters, and most recently Halftime. I believe that we'll keep it open much, much longer this time. I think that there were some management issues with other locations, and this is something that's very near and dear to my heart. And I'm planning to make it, something akin to the Cheers of Lincoln, where you can go and meet your friends, or you can go to the bar by yourself and never be alone because you know everyone that's there and everyone knows your name. We're serving my home-cooked recipes that I've developed over several years and have been training my staff on. So we're just looking to have a good neighborhood place to be, especially for the folks in Capitol Beach and downtown who aren't afraid to venture over the bridge.
Very good. Other questions? Carl?
Yeah, share, you won't share your recipes probably, but what are the menu items that you'll be serving?
Well, we're going to have your basic bar and grill fare, but added into that are some specialty items like my roasted red pepper and garlic hummus, or a cowboy caviar salsa, Southwest burgers that we've made homemade, my homemade baked potato soup and chicken noodle, my margarita chicken enchiladas. So just lots of different variety so that you can come in and have a good meal, come in and have a prime rib on Saturday night. My aunt's famous barbecue sauce on the ribs at some point, so
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Thank you very much.
thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify on these items? Next item, please.
All right, next in is item 13, application of Hunky Dory LLC, doing business as the Royal Grove, for a Class C liquor license at 340 West Cornhusker Highway.
Good afternoon.
Do you raise your right hands? Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you really believe it to be?
I do.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Chairman Christensen, members of the City Council, my name is Bill Austin. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Blake Austin Law here in Lincoln, Nebraska. My address is 301 South 13th Street, Suite 101, Lincoln, Nebraska 68508. I'm appearing here on behalf of Hunky Dory, doing business as the Royal Grove, and with me is Eli and Carrie Mardock, who are the part of the applicants team for this liquor license. First of all, we'd like to thank you very much for the reconsideration and the opportunity to appear before you today to suggest that this liquor license should be approved, and we hope you'll agree with us. My understanding is that the primary concern surrounding this liquor license was a zoning issue arising from the fact that you do need to have in the H3 zone a special permit under 2763-680 of the code, and part of the requirements of that special permit is that the building be located more than 100 feet from a residential district. Unfortunately, since the 1960s, the building comprising the Royal Grove is served by a parking lot located immediately to the north, as you know, that is zoned R2, but has been under a special permit for parking since the late 60s. We thought last week perhaps we had a solution to the conundrum, but that missed the mark, and so we are here today to suggest to you that notwithstanding the fact that we haven't completely resolved the zoning problem, that this license is worthy of your recommendation of approval. My understanding is that the city attorney has suggested there are three alternatives that you can consider today, one of which is reaffirm your denial, which would make us very sad. The second one would make us more less sad and happy, would be if you would recommend approval conditional upon clearing up the zoning, which is in process. And believe me, we would, if that's the best that we can do, we're very good with that. The problem is that the zoning process is taking some time and will take some time. And within that interim, there may be some problems operating unless the applicant can obtain additional special designated licenses, which unfortunately becomes a little bollocksed up by the fact that this is a catering license they're operating under, requiring a 21-day application period before a SDL can be issued. And then because of some issues concerning the number of SDLs that could be used at this site, the applicants have, according to the Liquor Commission, worn out their welcome. And they now have to go talk to the Liquor Commission in order to obtain additional special designated licenses, which causes an additional problem because the Liquor Commission is meeting on March 7th and probably won't meet again until April. So while this would be good to get an approval, and I know that you have talked about this previously, and I understand the city attorney's position on it, we would at least throw out the option of option 3, which would recognize under 2763-040 that this is and was an existing use at the time of the adoption of Title 27, and as such, when the special permitted use requirement came into effect in the 1990s, that this was essentially a specially permitted use. We think that there is a reasonable legal argument to support that position, and quite frankly, recognition of that sort of cuts the Gordian knot. It recognizes that this has been a use that is and has been there for more than 30, 40 years. We understand that there may be some concerns from a neighborhood standpoint, but at least to this point, those haven't arisen, and the operation has been engaged in putting on shows and utilizing special designated licenses at that location for some period. So we'd like you to at least consider option 3. We realize that you have already had some discussions on that, but really that solves an awful lot of problems if you give that some consideration. If you have some other questions regarding the applicant, again, Mr. Eli Marduk is here to try to answer any questions, and with that, I'll try to answer any questions as well.
Cindy?
Thank you. Thanks for being here today. So you've suggested that we look at option 3. If we were to look, instead pass option 2 and issue a conditional approval, are you willing to work within the guidelines of that? That's my first question.
I'll let Eli respond. When you say
Thank
work
you.
within the guidelines,
Well, I mean, the conditional, if we were, you've looked at the options, the conditional would be conditional upon zoning. We would recommend conditional upon you clearing up the zoning issue.
yes.
And you're okay with that, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. And then the second thing is I wanted to just, so that everyone knows, if you would just tell us what actions you have taken in the zoning process, change process right now.
So we've already applied for a zone change. We did that, I believe, 3 weeks ago, and that process is ongoing. I think there may be a hearing on April 9th concerning that issue.
If I could, Cindy, my understanding from Dave is that, David Carey, is that that is proceeding apace, and that it will be reaching the city council by April 9th for action. So it's moving along faster than we thought, quite frankly, which is good.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions? Thank you very much.
One other thing, if I could mention it, apparently last week, the manager application for this license was not reconsidered, and there had been a vote of denial on that. If it is at all possible, could we ask that that be on the next agenda? I know that contingent upon what the city attorney says you can do, but this is also
We'd
an
have to
assumption
move.
that you grant the license.
We'd have to move to reconsider that as well, then.
We moved to reconsider last week. I'm not sure what
I thought we did, yeah.
the question, yeah, we moved, I'm sorry. Maybe I don't understand the question.
The manager application.
I think because we assume they're called together for us, that we were reconsidering the package.
Right.
Only one item is on the agenda. Can we address that, Jeff?
Jeff Kirkpatrick, City Attorney. The motion, as was understood, I think, by both the clerk and myself, was to reconsider the liquor license, not the manager license.
So we'll have to deal with that.
And you have to reconsider that at the next meeting, during the meeting where it's first voted on, or at the next meeting, which would have been last week.
Jeff, when they're called together by the clerk, is that,
It combines it
Yes.
for purposes of the hearing. It doesn't,
when we reconsider, we don't, and we're, if we're thinking them as a package and reconsidering the package, we can't,
well, the motion would have been in order, but there was nothing, I think, from the terms
So-
of the motion.
The question is, the intent of the council. And I think it was the intent of the council to reconsider the whole thing.
Yes.
So what do you advise us on?
Well, I think there's probably time to file a new manager's application, and that no time will be lost would be my guess. Could be wrong on that, but I think that that would be in order.
is there a fee associated with filing a new one? And if so, can we waive it?
There is a fee? Do you,
That would be on the commission. We don't have a fee. But then he would have to file a new manager with the Liquor Commission.
Carl?
Yeah, Teresa, a question. Is there a time limit with the prior management application? Is that passed?
The time limit has passed on both.
Okay.
And so I would just let my colleagues know that when I spoke with members of the Liquor Commission, Control Commission, they indicated that even though the time limit had passed and we had submitted something, they would consider anything that this body put forward because it's a recommendation only.
So that's true. And I have another question then.
Okay.
From time to time, we have motions here that where we suspend our own rules. Could we suspend our rule on this one, on the manager application?
Or suspend the rule on reconsideration.
Suspend the rule on reconsideration, yes.
right, and that's a council rule. Yeah, you're,
Our own rule, right? Okay,
yeah, I believe you could.
okay. Very good.
But it sounds like the application's expired, time-wise.
Right, but the commission has already told us that they would be willing to consider it in regards.
Well, and whether they are or not, I mean, this council sets your own rules, they set their own rules. If it's
Yep.
expired, there's nothing you can do about it. If they're willing to be flexible, arguably, there's nothing you can do about that either. You can just control what you can control.
Well, this is also, I mean, could we do a substitute resolution that puts them both together in place of this? Would that be an option?
I think it's cleaner to suspend the rules. Yeah. So,
Thinking out loud.
Mr. Chair, I move we suspend the
I don't think
rules
you could.
and reconsider the manager
Is the
position.
right time?
okay, well,
Second.
it's been moved and seconded that we'll reconsider the manager application. Is there discussion on that? Okay, let's call the roll on reconsidering suspending our rules to reconsider the manager application. Please call the roll.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried 7-0.
Okay, so now when we vote, we will vote on both of those items. Okay?
I think,
I think the
Excuse
manager
me.
will reconsider today.
I think he's going to tell you that you have to have that on your agenda next
Yeah.
week.
I think so too.
Yes, that would be what I would tell
Okay.
you, if Bill hadn't done that already.
Okay.
Because you didn't have notice of the managerial license.
Okay.
Thank you.
So in the future, we'll make sure our intent is very clear when we do these.
Or you
things.
could just authorize us in the rules, Teresa and I, to read your minds.
We
And
could
just
do
act
that.
accordingly.
We could do that.
Happening.
So moved.
Just trying to streamline the process.
Okay.
That's what he asked for. So,
Gary,
We have voted to reconsider for next week, the manager application. Are there any more questions of these applicants?
Teresa, I think they still need to move on the.
Yeah,
Yeah, we'll come to the voting session on that
Oh, I
very
see.
shortly.
Right there,
Thank you.
yeah.
We're right there. Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Please come forward.
Would you raise your right hand?
Yes,
Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth as you really believe it to be?
I do.
Thank you. Just state your name and address.
Greg Vadova, and that's VOTAVA, 7601 Brummond Drive in Lincoln, Nebraska. Appreciate you all considering this, ladies and gentlemen. Again, my name is Greg Vodova. I'm a touring musician. I've been a recording musician all my life. I guess by a lot of people probably known as the name of Greg Lee. But I also have worked for the state of Nebraska for over 20 years, and I'm also a local business owner. I wanted to mention and bring up just a few points here. It seems like, and I appreciate you guys being willing to look at this a little bit closer, but it is obviously a zoning issue that we have with this, and I think it really only affects about 4 or 5 homes in the area that have been there for a long time, and with the establishment being there since, I believe, 1967, I believe most of the people in the neighborhood are pretty well aware of that. I just wanted to mention a couple points, though. There's obviously, from my surrounding friends and such, there's a lot of support from the community personally, and I know a lot of people have made a lot of great friends there over the years. A lot of strong relationships have actually been built over there over the years, and it's, really it is a place that people, over the years when I was growing up, we called that home because that was just where we hung out, right? Also, it has a very rich history, again, since 1967. There's a lot of touring bands that have come through that establishment over the years because it's close to the interstate, and between Denver and Chicago, it's just a great stop for touring bands, and so that does bring in a lot of revenue to the community, so that's been a great thing over the years. So, as noted by Kent Walgamont in the Journal-Star here recently, and you guys will probably recognize some of these names, Steve Vai, Great White, Blue October, Asleep at the Wheel, Pat Benatar, and of course our native Matthew Sweet grew up playing there and did a documentary filming there as well, so it has a great history. From the position of upcoming talent in our city, I think it's a great resource for them as well. I had the benefit of beginning to perform there. My first time, I believe, was about 1980, and played there lots of times. I don't think I can probably count the amount of times I've played there over the years. It ranks way up there, pretty high. But anyway, it gave me an opportunity to grow my career. And I've been able to do a whole bunch of, record a bunch of CDs and tour with a lot of national acts over the years, but I that's where I cut my teeth. And it's a great place because while there's a lot of establishments in Lincoln for live music, they're all very small. This gives a person, an upcoming musician, an opportunity to play on a bigger stage and get the sense and feel what it's like to be in front of a bigger crowd. And it's a great facility. So I just wanted to mention that. And of course, I did mention, obviously, there's more tax revenues for the city. And if I may, could I pass out this map here? If you would please pass that. I guess I need to keep one. So, and one back. Thank you. Thank you. So what I'm passing out here is a Google Maps photo from the internet that I printed off. And you'll notice that there are 3 homes here around that I really believe are affected by this. There are 2 others, it's kind of hard to see it, they're circled in black. One of these is where the grandsons of the current owners, the Jelsma family, live. So I think they'd be probably pretty much in favor of keeping things as is. Additionally, there's another one here on this corner here, which is the home of the gentleman who actually does all the audio and video at the establishment. So I think really the ones in yellow would be the most affected. And again, I just make the point that they've probably most likely known that the establishment's been there since 1967. So a couple other quick points. I don't know, I don't know, obviously I don't know all the legalities of it, but I suppose to meet the zoning issues, they could tear out a row of the parking and that'd probably make it work. But then obviously you'd have more people parking on the street, be a great big expense for the current lessees. And they've already put a lot of investment into this, and for us as musicians, we're very happy to see the establishment open again, and so we're very happy about that. So I just like to say I appreciate your consideration of this, and I fully support their license.
Okay, any
Thank you.
questions? Thank you very much.
You bet.
Would anyone else like to testify on this item? We can now,
We need to
Mr.
stay
C. Okay.
Members of the council, you requested a motion to amend. And
Yes.
I just have that here with the substitute resolution attached.
Okay. Well, let's move into our voting on these items once we've seen this amendment. Okay, one minute.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I'd like to move approval of items 9, 10, 11, and 12.
Second?
Moved by John, seconded by Jane. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Yes.
Job? Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
And Mr. Chair, I would like to move approval of the,
First, we have to have you move the item first, then the amendment.
oh, thank you. Okay, I'd move approval. You just took the words out of my mouth, of item 13.
Second?
Moved by John, seconded by Jane. Discussion?
Okay, and then I have a motion to amend number 1 that was just presented to us by the city attorney's office. So I'll make that motion.
Second.
Moved by John, seconded by Lyrian. And just so you know, this resolution, this motion to amend essentially incorporates option number 2 as discussed previously. Discussion?
Maybe we should just go through it, or Mr. C could go through it for the benefit of our audience and viewers.
Yes, Tim C., City Law Department. The 5 conditions here are: 1, that the applicant obtains a valid special permit for on- and off-sale alcohol sales, including the parking requirements on and off-site is consistent with the application that's actually before the Liquor Commission. The second condition is the applicant obtains a change of zone from R2 Residential District to H3 Highway Commercial District. That's already what's been applied for at the Planning Department and in front of the Planning Commission. The applicant modifies the beer garden to be in compliance with the application zoning codes. All employees must possess a valid responsible beverage server seller permit as required by Section 5.04.124 of the Municipal Code. And 5, the premises must comply in every respect with all city and state regulations, and that would be.
And I would have a question. There's no time frame in here for getting that. Do we need to consider saying it has to be done by June 30th or something to that effect?
What we've done in the past is we don't issue the liquor license until we verified with planning that those 2 requirements have been met.
Okay.
All right. Let's call the roll on the motion to amend number 1.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
And now on the main motion.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Next then are public hearing resolutions, and just a reminder, we do ask those giving testimony to please clearly state your name and address and to sign in on the sign-in sheet on the podium. I'll call item 14, accepting the report of new and pending claims against the city and approving disposition of claims set forth for the period of February 1st through the 15th, 2018.
Is there anyone here who would like to testify on an item, a pending claim before the city? Seeing none, next item, please.
All right, next is item 15, approving a contract for the operation of a Keno-type lottery between the city and EHPV Lottery Services, LLC, for a 5-year term commencing March 10th, 2018.
Council members, my name is Bill Harvey. I'm General Counsel for EHPV Lottery Services, 11248 John Galt Boulevard in Omaha, and very much appreciate the opportunity to be here today and the opportunity to serve as the city's Keno lottery operator under the trade name Big Red Keno. Happy to answer any questions you have about our renewal application today. And again, thanks for the opportunity to be here.
Any questions? I see none. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
All right, next is item 16, approving an amendment to the 48th and Layton Phase 1 redevelopment agreement to modify the design to increase the number of residential units, increase height and decrease retail square footage, increase TIF from 4.3 to 5 million, and to amend the schedule.
Members of the City Council, David Landis, Urban Development Department Director, the applicant in this case. And this is going to stand for the proposition and proves that John Camp is a man ahead of his time by exactly 1 hour. And I'll tell you what that is. You might remember that it was at 2:30 that John raised the issue. What happens if you've got a redevelopment agreement, like the case in Latitude, where perhaps the agreement itself isn't exactly the best business model for that? What do we do in that situation? Well, if we're quick-witted and sharp, we catch it, and we bring it back to the city council, and we say, when this project went to the lender, and the lender looked at the project, the lender raised this issue. You have some retail that you've located on the west side of this location. It's pretty far from Layton. It's certainly not abutting 48th Street, and it's not very visible. This is not the kind of location that retail flourishes in. Visibility is important. Picking up on the sensitivity of the lender, the designer said, well, we can do that with townhomes, because their location is nearly as important. And in fact, now that we go back, look at our pro forma and our lender, we have the opportunity of doing what we had suggested, thought about, and that was building 5 floors, including residential. So what this change does is threefold. First, it adds 50 residential units. Secondly, it reduces that retail that was questionable to the lender. And third, it takes the number which was authorized but not approved in the original agreement. The authorized number was 5 million, but the approved number was 4.35, and asks that, in fact, it uses the authorized number of $5 million of TIF. The developer's here and ready to answer your questions about the operations and what their plans are as well, but that's what's in this amendment, and it is an example exactly of what John was talking about at 2:30, and that's making sure the agreement conforms to a successful business plan of the ultimate user of the property.
If I may, I think it was 1:30, so I'm 2 hours ahead.
Let the record reflect. Fair enough.
Okay, Cindy.
Yeah, thank you for being here today. So I reached out to Wynn in your department, and so I just want to, one of the things that I picked up is we were working with 2 different numbers. The total cost of the project was estimated at 35, but there was only 30 reflected in the city and non-city portion. So if you'd just correct that for my colleague.
Thank you very much. We will correct it. And Wynn also was saying,
so the correct.
that's just arithmetic, and I missed that one. So
I know.
it's 35.
Okay.
The right number is 35.
And so the non-city contribution is 30 rather than 25.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you for the correction. Want to get it right.
Okay, Miriam.
The change in the design looks like it also affects the general amount of TIF dollars that are expected to be associated with the project. Is that correct?
Yes.
It increases it by 650,000. Can you talk about the uses of that $650,000?
Exactly. The uses don't change from what is originally in the redevelopment agreement. They remain the same, and they're primarily for acquisition and site preparation. Understand that most TIF projects come to us with justifiable, legal, and authorized uses that are stated in state law or implied in state law by precedent in the intervening years, with more of those than what the actual TIF generates.
Mood lighting.
How about that? Well, just keep talking. We'll listen.
We're on battery.
Okay.
There we go.
Thank you.
That was a security test.
This
Thank
has been
you.
an actual emergency.
So what happens is they bring us a laundry list of justifiable uses of TIF. Then from among those, we allocate numbers consistent with that. But it is almost always the case that there's a good deal of legitimate legal expenses for which there is not a TIF dollar to use. In this case, that number is larger than what was authorized, and what the amendment basically says is we're going to keep on the list, but we're going to have more money to spend on meeting those needs, and it does not exhaust the TIFable uses that are there in the project, as is quite commonly the case. So if there were more TIF dollars, we could legally spend them for those purposes. But this exhausts the TIF that we think is analyzable from the project.
Has not this site been acquired already, though, at a cost that's already known?
By the way, I'm going to let Tom Houston go into the details. It's not uncommon, and I'm not sure if it's the case here, but it's possible for a developer to buy land and then create an LLC for that specific project. And so the developer can transfer from themselves to the LLC, and that winds up satisfying the need for site acquisition. I don't know if that was the case here, but I'll let him answer that question. Okay?
Okay. Mr. Houston, you are up.
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, my name is Tom Houston. My address is 233 South 13th Street, Suite 1900, here in Lincoln on behalf of the redeveloper, which is 48th and Layton 1 LLC. I thought it'd be helpful to remind you what was approved back in November 2016. At that time, this 48th and Layton redevelopment project was approved by City Council at a $35 million anticipated investment consisting primarily of two structures. A structure on the southern portion of the property that would be comprised of 5 floors with retail on the first floor on the perimeter of the building. The second structure is the north building consisting of 4 floors, again with retail on the first floor with residential on floors 2, 3, and 4 with an option to add a 5th floor. The condition for adding the 5th floor is really why this amendment's back in front of you today, because that option to add the 5th floor was conditioned upon an office user occupying the first floor. We tried to create some flexibility in the redevelopment agreement, and we didn't get it quite right, and that's why we wanted to bring the amendment back to you to allow the 5th floor on that north building. And at that time, the redevelopment agreement and the bond ordinance did authorize the issuance of up to $5 million of tax increment financing, but because of the north building only having 4 floors, it was implemented on Exhibit C at $4.35 million. So Director Landis has correctly identified that the changes for the structure, and I think it can be best be seen by this project that rendering of that north building is 4 floors. It would be increased to a 5th floor to add residential units. The retail uses would be reduced from 28,000 square feet to 14,750 square feet. The dwelling unit count would increase from 184 dwelling units to 234 dwelling units, and then would actually authorize the full implementation of the $5 million of the tax increment financing. Right now, the construction is commencing. This site required a considerable amount of site preparation costs, including a surcharge that sat way too long, but it's ready to proceed at this point. The financing is in place and construction is progressing as quickly as possible. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have about it.
Questions? Larian.
Tom, could you elaborate then on the $650,000 in additional TIF that we would be authorizing today if this is approved? You mentioned site preparation. Does that mean that that's what all of that money will go towards?
The original Exhibit C to the redevelopment agreement identified, and we do this frequently in the redevelopment agreement, we identified additional or total eligible costs of $7.26 million that would be eligible under the redevelopment statute for purposes of identifying the eligible uses. Obviously, we had done our calculations and had projected the tax increment financing at only at $5 million originally, so there's an additional $2.26 million of additional eligible costs that the redeveloper would be covering in any event. And the additional costs that you're talking about, $650,000, that could be identified in the site acquisition costs or the site preparation costs. Frankly, that's about $650,000 right there, the additional site preparation costs that otherwise were not covered under the original redevelopment agreement that could be covered at this point. And so we were not amending Exhibit C because it was probably over-inclusive to begin with because we identified $7.26 million of eligible costs.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to testify on this item? Seeing none, next item, please.
All right, next is item 17, authorizing the mayor to execute contracts with energy service companies to design and install energy-saving equipment and systems that have payback periods of not more than 15 years for a useful life of 20 years or more.
Chris Connolly, City Law Department. While Frank is working on setting up PowerPoint here, I'll just talk about a little bit about what we're here for, talking about energy savings companies, or ESCOs. It's a delivery method for rehabilitation of buildings and other facilities to have a result of reduced savings or reduced energy use. We just saw an example of reducing energy use. I don't think that's what we had in mind. But we have some other ideas on how the ESCOs can be used, and I'll turn it over to Frank.
Frank Ularek, Sustainability and Compliance Administrator for the city. I've included in your packet a longer version of the PowerPoint. We've got this one shortened to meet our 5-minute time frame. But if you have more questions, we'll certainly take them on the other handout items. And again, intent of this resolution or policy is that we set some performance goals, expectations, and provide some clarity and direction to our staff and the ESCO partners and how to package these projects, how to develop these projects to where we've got some specific outcomes. We'd like to line that with a budget cycle for the next couple of years. So very critical that we move forward with some kind of direction on this policy. The process, I don't know how much familiarity there is, but basically you have to competitively procure your ESCO to bring them on to conduct the preliminary audits. Those are done at no cost by the ESCO firms. The next phase, and this is to a degree what's going to be triggered by this resolution, is giving us some guidance and clarity, is going into the investment grade audit where there's a contingent cost to actually go into the full-blown design, vetting of the contractors, developing all your final bid specs and cost savings and guarantees. The next component after that is completed is an independent review by an engineer certified in the state of Nebraska to verify that those savings projected by the ESCO in that proposed set of improvements is achievable given the assumptions and calculations that are provided in the IGA. Then you execute the project, simply enough. We see the benefits of the ESCO program as reducing cost of operations, increasing our facility comfort and functionality. And when you look at facility in terms of street lights, visual acuity, safety, all those kind of elements would be considered as a increased comfort and functionality.
Frank, could you move the microphone closer to you? Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you.
Bet. Other aspect or benefit of the ESCO program is that we are budget neutral during the financing term. In other words, savings that will be accrued throughout the term of your loan will keep you at budget neutral, and they will pay the debt on the financing. We also see in packaging projects that we have got some economies of scale versus doing one-offs and a lighting project here, an HVAC project there, to where we can package them and get some economies of scale. Of course, the LEAP goals, emissions reductions, energy efficiency, and the opportunity to do some renewable projects within this same kind of set of goals and outcomes is another opportunity and benefit we see. We support the local consultants, contractors, and suppliers. We level out, and this is kind of difficult to explain at times, but we level out the CIP and O&M budgets. If we're pretty much taking care of our CIP and we're using existing O&M for the next period, whether it's 10, 15 years, then it's very predictable. We don't see them wide swings in CIP demands or operational budgets as well. And we, through a one-stop shopping, essentially relieve staff burden on costs and time in developing, procuring, and overseeing these projects, again, from a one-off perspective. Lastly is, Nebraska hasn't done a whole lot with this mechanism. Some school districts, smaller communities, Omaha did one that was a quasi-ESCO maybe 6-7 years ago. But we would certainly be a leader and intend to be both in energy and environmental improvements in the community. Status was we selected 5 ESCOs for citywide, countywide PBC opportunities. On the city side, we completed all of our preliminary audits, which have cost estimates and a range of opportunities for us to consider. The next phase, again, investment grade audits is what we want to engage in more fully to flesh out the projects and opportunities moving forward. Brandon, I think, has got about 15 seconds for financing.
we'll be liberal with the schedule.
So options for financing, there, and we're not saying there's one best way to finance this, so there's multiple options to look at this. One thing that we've talked about is internal borrowing, so looking at our cash balances from our current funds and then borrowing some of those and then paying them back over time from the energy savings that would be a result of the project. You know, another option, municipal lease. We've done certificates of participation for different types of projects. Something like this would be available for that. Bonding, you could go out, look at doing a general obligation bond, which of course takes also voter approval to get that through. If you do have existing approved CIP projects that have funding sources available to do these types of projects, that's also another option. And then another option is also that the ESCOs provide the funding. You know, one reason that would probably be the least recommended option for us, because those rates might be a little bit higher than what we could get if we went to market or if we did an internal borrowing. From a financing, as far as project approvals, you know, any projects that are considered multi-year projects have to be approved by the council. And then also funding resolutions required, especially if that's finance. So any type of debt obligations has to be approved by the council as well. In addition to requirements for appropriation, if there is a project that has not been approved by a council, so typically a lot of projects come through the budget process where the CIP is developed, that's included. It's a 6-year CIP. But the first 2 years are what's appropriated within that budget process. So if a project is not included in that original plan, that has to go through a process to go to the Planning Commission to be reviewed for conformity with a comprehensive plan. And then after that, it would come back to council for consideration.
All right. Continuing on.
Okay, so the status of the resolution is that this is a statement of policy, really. And so we're asking the council to approve this so that it gives us as staff the parameters within which to work to come up with contracts for various projects. Now, as written, the current resolution would have the mayor given the authorization to execute all of these. We expect that there's going to be a motion to amend that will change that such that these contracts will be brought to the council, as they will generally always be, or most always will be, multi-year contracts. And that's because of the measurement and verification process that takes place after installation or construction is something that takes place over a number of years. There are ways to do that within the contract. It could be prepaid. We're not going to quibble on that. We're just going to call it a multi-year contract, and we're going to bring all of these to the council for that purpose. But this will still be useful to us in planning and being able to work with the various ESCOs on the projects that we're looking for, and it will not have an impact. It's not taking any authority away from the council on any of these projects. We have the 15-year payback that we're looking for these projects. State statute allows us to go up to 30 years. We're not looking to do that. We want to keep this in a much more reasonable time frame. And the lower payback will end up restricting some of the projects that we're going to be able to do this way. But that's all right. We think that this works as economically, this will work better for the city. We want to get the payback done as quickly as possible while there's still some life left in the equipment that is purchased, so that we can really start to see some great savings at that point. And we feel like 15 years is a reasonable breaking point for equipment that may last 20 to 25 years. Maybe we can get another 5, maybe 10 years out of the equipment that would be purchased. We are also conforming to state law with this resolution. This is a process that was set up about 20 years ago And so this is our first real full venture into it. ESCOs have been around a little longer than that, I believe. But in Nebraska, the statutes really just came in within the last 20 years. And so I think
Just
we could talk about benchmarking.
Yeah, in terms of that payback period, we called around, not just the projects that were recommended to us by ESCOs, we called other states, Colorado Energy Office, state of Kansas, Lawrence, Kansas had a recent large project, $11.4 million with a 22-year payback. I'm not sure I would proceed with something that large, that type of payback period. But it has been done, and they have their rationale. Kirksville and Marysville, 15 years. Missouri Western State University, Newton, Kansas, 20 years. We've got some more in your larger packet from Colorado and Texas and so forth. But from the federal guidance, we're seeing 12 to 25 years is the sweet spot, so to speak. And again, it's going to be based on your local needs and desires, and that's what we're here to do. But for the most part, I'm hearing 15 years is an appropriate regional average for us to pursue. Will we try and get 5 and 10-year projects? You bet. That's the ultimate goal. But more than likely, with our low energy rates, that's going to be strictly a lighting project and not much value in adding other HVAC improvements and other opportunities, which we could with the 15-year payback. So that's our approach. Again, we're looking for guidance and direction that we can give staff. We've got a couple IGAs that are pending, just wanting to move forward so we can get that incorporated into the budget process. And we'd welcome any questions, critique, concerns, and moving forward.
Questions? Jane?
Frank, could you go in a little more detail? I'm looking on the last page. It said Golden, Colorado had a 7-year payback, then that included a $500,000 grant. Do you know what some of those projects were that successful and a 7-year return on investment?
They were a broad set of facility improvements, but the $500,000 factored into that 7-year payback. I don't know what, absent of that $500,000 grant, the payback was, but we can find out more if you're curious about that. Golden also had a 17-year payback on a solar project that they did separately from that initial project as well.
John?
Well, during our discussions I've had with you gentlemen, I've expressed the concern that the way this legislation has evolved, you're asking, it would specify they're multi-year contracts, so the council does have to give approval versus the mayor just unilaterally doing it. But that approval stage, as I'm understanding everything now, is going to be after you do the investment grade audits. And my concern, as I expressed to you, is at the beginning of the pipeline, I'd like to see some dialogue, discussion, and some type of a step that's taken that the city council will say, yes, on these proposed projects, we're in agreement, go forth.
Right, and we have provided the preliminary audits, and if you would like to get copies again, I think Cindy got us set the last go-around when we discussed LEAP. I'd be glad to provide those preliminaries again. And they provide roadmaps and options, but this step is kind of needed so we can, ferret out the best projects and move forward from there. And I'd be glad to engage.
Maybe I'm not communicating. I'd like to see some of a stage at the very beginning before you even do the freebie audits to say these are projects we're going to look at, because it does have implications on the city. And using my old snowball on the Matterhorn, the minute you start, even with a freebie audit, the snowball's going, it gains momentum, it gains mass. And even with getting at this point after the investment grade audits, there can be a liability if we don't go forward to reimburse the ESCO company. And we're seeing that with the streetlights, that there could be a potential $44,000 to $99,000 payback. And I'd just like to see that there be agreement that, these are things we can consider looking at. And so we understand what the implications are on the city, and especially if you're talking about borrowing from our internal bond reserves or treasury reserves.
Can I clarify, on the preliminary audits, they were broad. They hit every aspect of Parks and Rec, Public Works, libraries, fire, and police. So there was no selection process in that. They basically look at where's the spend occurring, then where are our opportunities to recapture that spend and make these improvements, which then gives you a broad roadmap of opportunities, a menu, so to speak, to proceed with the IGAs. Glad to discuss the PAs, glad to discuss scope of the IGAs moving forward as well. Absolutely want to be transparent and inclusive in this whole process.
I guess I'm still not being clear. Before you even do all that, for example, we didn't even know what these things are lurking out there until it was finally asking several times and legislation came forward. And I just think you're talking about a whole new shift in projects, and I'd like to see that the council is involved before you spend, administrative time, of staff time, and so forth to go ahead, because preliminarily, maybe we can just say, right now, in the scheme of things and the implication it has on obsolescence replacement and so forth, that we take that consideration, we have a voice in the matter. It's kind of a checks and balances.
Rick Hoppy, Mayor's Office. Mr. Camp, can I ask, I'm not quite sure how to phrase this, but how do we know what information to bring to you to allow you to make the decision without the industrial grade audit? Because if I'm hearing Frank saying that the preliminary audit has very broad, non-specific information that needs to be nailed down, so we have much more specifics for which you to make a judgment for the industrial grade audit. And before we undertake that industrial grade audit, that's why we've come to you with this resolution, so we can at least have some understanding of what direction we should be going before we engage with the IGA.
Again, the preliminary
Pretty
audits.
engaged under your scenario, Mr. Hoppy, because you want to bring the investment grade audit to us. That's already been done, and you basically the horse is out of the barn. And I want to see up front, before we have commitments, or even a contractor, a vendor has done some work, that you've really started paving the way. And my experience has been over the last many years that once you get started with one vendor, just even doing freebie work, it keeps going. And I think that not having that ability up front to say, we want to look at, streetlights make some sense, let's do that, or what project, or maybe we'd say, let's do a quadrant.
But how do we know that without the IGA, is what I'm getting at.
Well, I'm just saying I want to be informed. I don't want to get hit a year later, or you say, well, it was in the CIP, which is a laundry list and a wish list to a certain extent, even if it's in that 2 years. I want council involvement if I can support this.
Well, if you're asking for us to give you the list of, or the information from the preliminary audit and from the industrial grade audit, it's fantastic. But right now, since we have to come back now with the amendment we think is going to be offered for you all to approve all the ESCOs, I don't think you're going to have us come back in a year and say it was in the CIP.
I don't know what you're going to do in that regard, but I just want to know before you say we're going ahead with anything, that we have council agreement on what projects we feel are most important.
Which is what will happen then when the ESCO comes to council. Is that what we're...
I guess I'm just not explaining myself. I want it day one, minute one, you say, here are some areas, streetlights, something on libraries, maybe a fire station roof or something. These are things that we feel could be a subject of an ESCO. And I want that dialogue and all. I don't want to wait until you've made commitments to do the IGAs, the investment grade
Well, we can
audits.
certainly notify you of that of the areas we're looking at.
I want council action to agree.
Council action on the IGAs, even though it doesn't meet the contract rules for these are not multi-year agreements, the IGAs. And that's why we're coming to you with this resolution, so that before we go into an IGA, we have some idea of what council will approve.
Well, whatever it takes to make it so we are up front, that's what I want. I don't
know how we seek approval for you though, without knowing all the information that we need to know from an IGA.
Yeah, I'm going to recognize Cindy here.
Yeah, thank you. So Frank, thanks for being here. You sent me these audits, the general audits that you described as very broad, okay? And would you expect that they're going to be more broad audits, or does that kind of encompass everything that we might possibly look at least at this point in time?
That encompassed probably the wealth of opportunities, for libraries. The preliminary audit was completed, Parks and Rec, police, fire, public works to a degree. We didn't do a deep dive into wastewater, Ashland, the drinking water system, or the MSC, which was undergoing a lot of improvements already.
Okay,
So
and then
we've got
I'm sorry.
pretty comprehensive roadmap. We talk about them being very high level, but there's very good quality work gone into those preliminary audits. A lot of effort gone into digging out of the energy usage for the last 3 years, utility usage, and these firms are very good at ferreting out the best opportunities moving forward, so.
Okay, and so from those, at some point in time, has there been, or will there be, further discussions narrowing that down to these are some projects we think might be worthwhile exploring an investment-grade audit?
Right, and the first step in getting there is being able to tell Schneider Electric, Ameresco, whoever we engage, 15 years is our performance goal. This is our expectation. Please design your IGA around that approach.
Okay, and so my question is going to Councilman Camp's concerns. At some point between where we have the preliminary audit and where we actually commission an IGA, isn't there a place where we've gotten rid of maybe some of the ideas because they're not going to meet you guys? If we give you a 15 years or less directive, then you're not going to consider anything that's going to look like it's going to be above that and go into an investment grade audit. Is that a fair assumption on our part?
Right, and in terms of a total project. So we may couple a 12-year return with a 17-year return on a project for a facility to make it balance out to a 15-year, as long as the assets that you're improving have a 20-year life or greater.
So I'm just thinking that there is a place between the broad and the very narrow where the council can be involved in the discussions about here's what you have the preliminary audit council, here's what we're the ones that we're thinking of pursuing with an investment grade audit. Right. Would that be a fair assumption that let's call it a pause button, that somewhere it exists?
We're always willing to have a discussion, but if you're talking about us bringing a $40,000 IGA to you, that is a radical change in how we do business. That is not coming before the council now. I mean, if there were something in the CIP or it had been budgeted for us to make some weatherization improvements, for instance, on a building, and we weren't involving an ESCO, we wouldn't come to you. And I guess what our concern as administration is that not a bunch of bureaucratic red tape be put in place for what is mostly routine efforts. I'd also point out that the IGA isn't just wasted money. That even if council said, look, we're not comfortable with the ESCO moving forward, the IGA does give us a roadmap for how to do improvements that we could utilize in some other fashion, even if we didn't choose to do an ESCO.
And directors are going to, and their staff are going to give me feedback. Frank, I don't want you wasting your time with this effort or that. They're helping to guide this. They know what their CIP needs are, and they know what their facility needs are. So really the most authority and responsibility should be with the facility owners and operators, which can help guide this process and get the products we want. But I'm open to any sharing and conversations you need.
So we could have the conversation that said, hey, or even the email that said, hey, listen, council, we are looking at the possibility of pursuing investment grade audits on this, and this is probably what the expenses will be, or something of that nature.
Sure, we can do that. We can notify you, sure.
Okay.
Okay, John?
Yeah. You know, you talked, for example, about bundling projects with a 17 and a 12 or whatever, and there's those types of things that I'm concerned about what you come to us. The various departments are going to say, yeah, we need these capital improvements, but, you know, it also puts long-term budgetary constraints, because once you get past the position of obsolescence, for example, you do all the streetlights at one time, and not that it's not a good project, but I'm using as an example here, you do them all at one time, then that means they're all going to come due for replacement pretty much at the same time. So now you keep creating these big
capital investment.
Yeah, and it just, you know, we've experienced that with fire engines, for example. We bought 7 or 8 at one time, and then now, whoop, we need to replace all those 7 or 8. So it just really spikes up the budget in that point.
13 or 14.
And, you know, and I appreciate your willingness to send us an email. I want a formal step. I just do, because it has millions of dollars of implications. It's not the way you've done business, because ESCOs have not been used before. And so with the potential budget implications now and in the future, I can't go along without having the council involvement on a positive basis.
Okay.
Up front.
Are there other questions? Marion?
I want to address the financial benefits That's one area of question I have. Another is about procurement and the competitive process. So just starting with financial benefits, it's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, that after the energy savings are used to pay off the financing, that then you would have freed up dollars.
That's pure profit.
So it's a savings measure over a 15-year period or less. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay, so this is a kind of a fiscally smart thing to do, as long as you manage what John's talking about, and we don't have a bunch of replacements going on all at once, that perhaps pacing some of the purchases, if they are products, as opposed to a facilities upgrade. Is that fair?
Not sure I'm following.
Well, he raised this issue of purchasing things like light bulbs and having them all, need replacement at once. And so generally in the city, we are looking to kind of pace replacements. But ESCOs are dealing with more than just purchasing of products. It's dealing with facility, energy improvements, energy efficiencies, HVAC systems, et cetera, which won't necessarily mean that every HVAC system in the city is needing to be replaced at the same time, correct?
Correct. And controls, HVAC controls, which improve the efficiency of the system themselves. But say on the streetlight program, they're 25, 30-year LEDs. I think the warranties actually only go to 10 years. So we have every expectation that, they're not all going to quit on year 25, nor are they going to quit on year 10. That'll be some staggering, and there'll be some amount of maintenance that's due every year. I don't know if I answered your question.
Okay. But the main point was that by switching to more energy efficient models, maintaining our facilities or operating our facilities, in the long term, we're going to be realizing cost savings.
Right. And in a simple comparison on streetlights, we're going to save well over $1 million a year.
Okay.
On energy and maintenance rates, and after year 15, when the debt's paid off, that's $1 million a year to the city's bottom line.
Okay. The legislation does have several references to council involvement. And I believe we have an amendment before us that will increase that. Is that right?
I think it's more a recognition of the fact that, as Ms. Lamb has pointed out, her belief that the ESCOs are multi-year contracts, and by definition, multi-year contracts have to come to City Council. So essentially, the two projects that we might have argued were already in the CIP and that we already had funding for and could have done if these were not multi-year contracts will indeed now come before the council.
Yeah. Any argument that a project would have been completed in 3 months, say, that's out the window now, because we would have to consider it a multi-year due to the energy savings verification component year after year.
Okay. The legislation also talks about procuring through a competitive process, which is good. That's how we like to do business.
Right.
But I was hoping to get some clarification on the competitive process for the ESCO services itself, the selection of the ESCO with which we might do business versus a project that might be bid competitively. Can you help us understand where the competitive bidding happens, if not in both places?
And Chris may help out on this, but we followed the state law and city procurement process in engaging the ESCOs, selecting the ESCOs for broad services for energy efficiency.
So they become qualified vendors?
They're pre-qualified.
Okay. But what about the
essentially.
projects themselves?
We then use their strengths and capabilities based on their experience and resumes, and assign various workload between the PBC, county, and city, and they proceeded with the preliminary audits. Now, when they actually go to the IGAs, they start vetting local contractors, and the IGAs that we've been involved in to date, their first question is, who are the contractors that you have a lot of confidence in? Who are your good vendors and suppliers? Who do you want us to engage in? So we're not necessarily bound by low bid, but we're looking for quality and value in every project that we implement. So they have that authority. We follow state and city procurement to the point where we bring on the ESCO, but then there's some latitude for them, kind of like a bid-build process, to go ahead and pick and choose and get the best value and negotiate with contractors and suppliers for your endpoint. With the incentive, obviously, if we've got a target of a payback period, They're going to minimize costs of vendors, suppliers, as well as, limit their profit. Obviously, they're looking for a profit, but it all has to fit within our financial framework. So we see it as a good model in a private-public partnership.
There's two parts I would add to that. The state statute requires that we do a request for qualifications, and so we've done that. But we've also taken the extra step of doing an RFP. We've got 5 contractors that are qualified. We went through an RFP process for the streetlight program, and we intend to kind of go through a similar process for other projects. And so that's, the state law requires the RFQ. We're doing an RFP because that's part of what we do typically for city projects. So we're going to do that. For the streetlight program, we have not used purchasing's e-bid system because there were a lot of the technical aspects of the lighting that was really kind of dictated by what LES has. They have an approved list of luminaires, and the poles are designed by LES, and so we have to work within those parameters. It made it a little bit shorter list of vendors that we could possibly use for that kind of a project. So, it made more sense to stay with working with Schneider as the ESCO in developing the vendors for the products mostly, and even in the labor. And we expect to bring that to you soon. In terms of other projects down the road, though, I think we can look at using the e-bid system as a platform for developing interest. We would still use all the same terms and conditions for selecting bidders as we have talked about so far, and that is it could be lowest cost, and we want it to be as low cost as possible. But since we're looking for quality and since we're looking for savings generated by equipment in particular, it won't necessarily follow the lowest responsive bidder process, largely because we're using an RFP process as opposed to a straight bid process.
Okay, I'm going to recognize Jane.
Well, I think we are all in agreement. We want to engage in projects that bring energy savings to our city and our taxpayers. I think we all agree on that. I think John's point is valid. We want the flexibility as the city council and a body to work with the ESCOs in determining which are those projects that we can reasonably afford at this point in time and that have a return on investment. So the question to you, Frank, what is the flexibility we have if we go forward with that investment grade audit, which is more like a feasibility study, isolating those projects, say, if we're going to be focusing on the library, and they have multiple projects, and they're going to dig in the weeds and tell us the specificities of each project, the costs, and the energy savings we hope to achieve with each one of those components. What flexibility do we have at that point in time if we move forward with that investment grade audit, which we know is a commitment of our funds going forward to do that complete analysis? But then do we have like a whole menu of projects that will come back to us on the city council based on your recommendation and based on the energy savings that we are anticipated to see? Will we have that flexibility at that point in time to say, yes, let's move forward on, 2 projects here and 2 projects there, we don't want to have our hands tied on committing to, we have to go down this whole pathway and commit to 4 or 5 projects when we really are only interested in maybe 2 of those things that they've outlined.
Well, absolutely, and the IGA for libraries will be completed soon, and we'll have a draft form, and if you wish to engage in discussion on what's being recommended and proposed there, that's an alternative.
I guess I would say if an ESCO came where you're skeptical of some of the pieces, you say no. And then we go back, we talk to the vendor, and then we repackage and try to bring it back along the lines that you're suggesting.
Because the questions come up.
But one thing I caution you though, I don't think you should engineer these from the dais. Okay, if you, and I don't think that's what you're saying, but just to be clear, if you're saying to us, look, I have skepticism about a piece of the package you've brought us, then say no to the ESCO. We then go back and give the vendor time to change it, go along the lines that you'd suggest, and then come back with you complete package, because these pieces all work together in terms of what the ESCO is doing to guarantee you that price. So if you pull out one piece, you've changed the dynamics of the entire thing, and we really do owe it to our partners, who are these ESCOs, to come back and say, okay, if that piece is out, here's how it'll change the agreement.
I think what John is objecting to is that blending. where you can take that 17 to 18-year payback project and blend it with a 12-year. That's not, I don't think, our intention of.
Okay,
of
but
the-
understand what that means in many circumstances. So for instance, we have an HVAC that has a 12-year payback. Are we really not going to do the weatherization, which is a small piece of the entire thing that may be, tens of thousands of dollars, but is necessary to go along with the HVAC? I mean, why wouldn't we do both those pieces together?
Well, I agree, they both should be done together, but they both should be listed as separate projects.
They are,
Rather-
and that's what we see both in the preliminary and investment grade audits after we've scoped it, is there'll be a list of improvement measures with each individual payback periods, as we've seen in the PA, but it's brought to more detail in the IGA. And there's still a selection process at that point. But you don't want to get to the point of, all right, you spent $50,000, $100,000, whatever on an IGA you've committed to, and you end up doing $50,000 worth of lighting. I mean, that's really kind of defeating the purpose of getting real value and improvements in your facilities. So
You-
I
you
want to
also-
avoid that mentality if we
You
can.
also have a weighting issue. I mean, if you're putting in a new boiler, that's obviously a big expense, but it may have a relatively short payback, which is great. But then if you're talking about weatherization or some of these others, where there's a smaller payback, the cost of it may be pretty low, yet the payback may be 17 or 20 years, but the cost of it is so low that it's not really going to impact the overall cost of it. Now, if we're talking about a roof, that could be different. But if we're talking about some of these smaller pieces, the weighting of it versus the main portion of the contract is where some of these are going to come in. Yes, you may have, like I said, you may have a boiler, you may have weatherization, you may have some small solar kind of project that would be included in the same building. And the idea is to average those all together, and if you can come up, and with proper weighting, if you can come up with the right formula that pays for all of that over 15 years, then that's what we're looking to do.
Okay.
And that
I'm gonna
avoids
recog-
future capital.
I'm going to recognize Benny.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, everyone, for this conversation. This is a little confusing, and I'm glad we're talking about it more. I struggled mostly with the word execute, and I think I hear you saying, what I heard execute is that the mayor could do this without ever talking to us at all. And I hear you say today that's not the case, that he would be executing the research to develop the project to bring back to us. Did I read that wrong?
What the mayor was, as it's written right now, the mayor would be authorized to sign the energy financing contract, which is the installation. And that is not something that the council would approve per se. However, the council would have approved the funding to get us to that point. And our expectation was that there would be some information that would be shared with the council in order to get us to that point. But just like so many other contracts, the council approves the funding, and it's up to the administration to go ahead and carry out the project. And so that was the thought behind how that was written.
So you'd come to us with the idea of the funding first, then we'd say, okay, and you go out and do the research and come back for the execution.
Well, we may do the research first. I mean, if we can get a preliminary audit done for free, then obviously that's not a cost consideration. But if there's funding already available, then certainly the mayor would be authorized to go ahead and execute the contract. If the funding is not available yet, then we have to come to the council to ask for that.
John? Okay, go ahead.
I had a follow-up question which relates more to the resolution. Should I wait for that to?
You mean the amendment?
The amendment, yeah, I'm
Okay,
sorry.
let's wait on the amendment for the
Thank you very
amendment.
much.
For example, you just mentioned you might do weatherization. It could be $10,000. I think Mr. Hoppy and you, Chris, said that. If it's a $10,000 item, we ought to be doing that in maintenance anyway. We shouldn't be fabricating it into some big contractual ESCO. To me, the ESCOs would be for bigger projects. But again, as you go down that timeline, getting the investment grade audit, the IGA as you're nicknaming it, that's going to incur expenses. Now, what Mr. Shob was also saying, well, Aaron, you've talked about, well, it's a budgeted item. The whole theory behind an ESCO is there is no budget. It's done off the balance sheet, and it's just the energy savings pay it back. So there's supposedly no direct debt unless you do a certificate of participation or a bond issue. But from what I'm hearing, it's all going to be off the balance sheet. So there's no, you're just saying, well, it pays for itself. So there's no money appropriated. So that's the argument we're going to hear, but there's staff time and everything else. And again, to me, it's avoiding the issue. It's perhaps even down the road getting into a habit of putting off, or just, I mean, weatherization. I mean, that's such a no-brainer. If a property owner isn't doing that, he or she or it is out to lunch. And so I hear all these things you're throwing in to make this thing work and sound good. I think up front we need to be able to define that, if we're gonna do these, let's do them on the big projects. Let's know what you're talking about, because once you do that investment grade audit, that vendor is more than likely to get the ultimate contract. That vendor is also gonna say, if you don't go with me, like we're seeing with Schneider right now, and this isn't bad, it's just the way it's happening right now, that you pay us back $44,000 for that IGA because you didn't go ahead with streets with us, street lights, and $55,000 if you don't do the schools. And we don't even know what that is, but you're coming to us, and that is a liability. And we don't really avoid it by going together with them. It's a liability to the city that the council has had no authority in.
Well, you can look at it as liability, or you can also look at it as very cheap engineering services that, you don't want.
It's expenditure of funds.
You don't want to do
It's
this.
an expenditure of funds that we're authorized to execute. I mean, we're not using.
I don't want to
You're
authorize
not-
those ahead of time.
Wait a minute.
I don't want to do that, Mr.
But
Hoppe.
we already have the authorization, or we couldn't
Oh,
engage in the
where?
contract.
Where?
Either as part of their budget, in whatever line items these things exist in parks or libraries or wherever. We have to come to you if we're moving funding from one department or one area to another. So if we're trying to use money for an IGA
You don't
that
have
is
to
not
do that.
authorized, we have to come back to you.
Do that. Plus, we did not approve the current two-year budget, if you remember. This city council never voted to
Mr.
approve
Camp, that's
it.
an entirely incidental issue to this.
No, it
The
isn't.
question
You just
you're
said you
asking
approved it.
is,
We
do we
haven't.
have the authority to do this? And we do. And if the money is budgeted and it's been approved through the budget process, regardless of how we got to that approval, then we have the authority to move forward on the IGA. I would also point out that it isn't just wasted money if you don't approve. As at one point, I think Ms. Rabel wanted to do, she wanted us to pay for these industrial grade audits and then use the results for us to go ahead and implement the changes that are recommended by those IGAs. In short, the IGAs have value outside of this process. So even if council says we don't want to do an ESCO, we want you to do this in a different way, we need the IGA in order to do that and move forward. So you're getting product for that money.
But I may not want that product. I want to decide up front which IGAs or which ESCOs we think are valid at this point in the city's budget. Maybe we've got some more time, we can get out of some assets, and we can prolong that.
But I think what Mr. Hoppe's point is the mayor's already authorized under our charter to make those expenditures without our authorization because of the amount of money involved.
Or the
Is that
multi-year
correct?
contract, or the,
Right.
the basic areas, we've got to come to you if we're moving money around. We've got to come to you if it's not in the CIP. And in this particular case, we got to come to you if it's an ESCO contract, because it's a multi-year contract.
Jane.
That's great. So Frank, tell me how this is different than the mandate of the Public Buildings Commission. You know, they're entrusted with the maintenance and oversight and operations of our facilities.
Right.
So how is this going to be different? Because they also have a capital investment list that we approve on the Public Building Commission. You know, facility upgrades come before the Public Building Commission. We understand the value that they bring and the maintenance. I want to make sure that, you know, weather stripping, that's common, and that's already in the capital improvements budget for the buildings that the Public Building Commission has oversight of. So is that going to be separate and different from what we've already identified on the Public Building Commission? You know, in my mind, I'm thinking that these are bigger, longer-term projects that we are going to look into, rather than all the ordinary, normal maintenance, property management that the Public Building Commission has been doing for years. Can you explain that difference?
Well, for one thing, PBC, and you look at the phone book with the property management, and you've got quite a significant staff there to take care of PBC.
Most of those are cleaning staff, Frank. Over half of them.
There's a lot of maintenance folks involved in that.
An awful lot of maintenance in there.
A lot of maintenance folks. We don't necessarily have maintenance people or supervisors. Yeah, wastewater and Lincoln Water System have dedicated maintenance folks for the operations, but for buildings, other than Rod Hendrickson out at MSC doing the best he can do, we don't have extensive staffs available to do this type of work. And to me, I see the ESCOs as an extension to a degree of that staff in helping us to make these improvements.
We're so weatherized. Why is my office so cold all the time? I really don't believe that this building is weatherized. I'm just going to put that out there.
And similarly from the PBC, I mean.
All right.
That's a
Other
PVC issue.
questions?
Yeah, I've got
Okay.
an issue with the PVC.
All right. Thank you very much. We will take public comment now. Would anyone like to testify on this item? You have 5 minutes, please.
Hello, I'm Tim Green, Green Lighting Company, 7835 Fort Street, F-O-R-T, in Omaha. I'm in my 15th year of doing commercial lighting. I was traveling in Colorado when Nancy Hicks' nice article came out on February 16th about this meeting today and how it would address the street lighting. I fell out of my chair. I fell out of the car when I got the phone call on it. I've done thousands and thousands of LED installations, if you want to count the bulbs. I've got 16,000 4-foot LED tubes in stock right now in Omaha. 15-year payback is insane. Planning, because you believe a new fixture is going to last for 25 years, is even crazier. Couple thoughts on lighting. If we're using a fluorescent technology, we have both the tube, the lamp, the bulb, and a ballast. Now we go to LED. I've got the light emitter, the LEDs, and a power supply. Guess what fails? The power supply. The LEDs slowly wear out over time. They slowly produce less and less light, just like our old street lights, right? You put a new bulb in, over time it dims. Eventually it goes into cycling mode and needs to be changed. These power supplies fail. There isn't a soul on the planet other than specialty applications for NASA. There isn't a soul on the planet that you can give you 25-year reliability power supplies. It doesn't exist. If I walk into any of my commercial clients with the recommendation, I've got a great idea for you on lighting, and the payback occurs in 14 years, I'd be out the door so fast. I'd like to redo this room. Guess what the payback would be? All LED here, no more fluorescent, 2 years.
I was going to say 18 months.
Could be, depending on the hours of use.
Yeah.
Now, an ESCO could be a wonderful aid, help, a great tool. It should be in your toolbox, I think. But it should be for those things that even an engineer would have trouble identifying, right? That $3 million chiller that needs to be replaced. What do? Who's going to build it? How much will we save? Can we cobble through for another 2 years using the old item? That's when I need an expert. But you know what? To audit your lights in this building, my 10-year-old daughter could do it because she's helped me before. Here's what you need. You need a piece of paper and a pen. You need to be able to count. And eventually, you need to be able to multiply relatively small numbers. And that's how you do an audit. In Nancy's nice article, this ESCO concept. See, an ESCO can help you identify what you need to do, then tell you how much you'll save on energy, and then take away all those budget concerns. That's the siren song aspect to this, right? That's the danger. When I get to shore, I may be in big trouble, right? Well, with lighting, all you need to know is how many hours do I use that light per year? Nothing easier than the street lights. We don't need an audit from anyone. You can get online, go to the U.S. Naval Observatory. They will tell you for every day of this year, the next 100 years, here in Lincoln, Nebraska, when dusk occurs and when dawn occurs. In fact, if you go through a whole year,
1 minute,
we experience 4,300 hours of darkness. Now, if you go to LED lighting in your typical residential light, which is 120 watts now, you'll go to 40, perhaps a bit more. You'll save 80 watts. We know what your power cost is. It's 4.86 cents in the new tariff with LES. So we know, you and my 10-year-old just calculated, you're going to save $16.72 on power every year, plus another $1.38 off the monthly maintenance charge. you'll save $33 a year on a light. Now, if anyone would like to know sometime, perhaps the city would like to spend some time with some of us out in the real world where we have to meet budgets and pay for things right away, I could modify those lights you have now without changing all the fixtures, give you more light to the ground at $50 per fixture. Now, Mr. Chairman, what's the payback time? A year and a half, isn't it, for the part? So I'd urge you, last thought quickly, separate the lighting from everything else in terms of your energy savings thoughts. There's no greater savings. In this room, we'd save 80% on the power going to LED. It's there, but it doesn't take an expensive report. In fact, everyone that works with LES, Omaha Public Power, Nebraska Power, and I've worked with all three on rebates, we do those audits for free without obligation.
Thank you very much.
So I'd have you rethink those things.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Green, I know you've introduced yourself as a lighting person. What about the use of ESCOs elsewhere? Is that out of your field?
It's a great
or can
way
you
to
make
make a ton of money.
Who?
For the ESCO, a ton of money. Now, here's why. You can easily take advantage of your buyer who doesn't realize how much energy savings will be accrued over the years. Good example, I've got an acquaintance who sold several military bases on this. You come in, General, wouldn't you like to have all LED lighting? We'd love it, but I have no budget. It literally takes an act of Congress. Tell you what, General, how about if you and I just split the energy savings for 7 years, and we'll put the lighting in for free. Now again, we're back to a real world 2-year payback. How much money have I made as that escrow? A ton of money, a ton. In fact, if you go down that route, make sure that when you get a bid, you get an ESCO bid and a buy it now bid, so you can see exactly what the difference is. Lastly, if you're going to do an ESCO on lighting, 4 years, even on street lights, 4 years ought to be the maximum term for payback, not 15.
Thank you very much. Next testifier.
Good afternoon. My name is Kobe Mack, and I'm here to add to the acronym alphabet soup you've been hearing today. Here, appearing on behalf of the Lincoln Independent Business Association, LIBA, we'd like to make some suggestions regarding the resolution to start using energy-saving companies, or ESCOs, to make our city more sustainable. LIBA is not opposed to our current or future mayor working toward an energy-efficient city. In fact, we should consider every opportunity to be good stewards of our resources. While we encourage the exploration of new ideas, we have the following issues with the ordinance. As written, it appears to allow a current or future mayor to spend reserve funds, doing that without a vote of the people. Number two, it appears to allow a current or future mayor to spend funds without any further votes of the city council. And number three, the city council appears to be abdicating its authority on almost anything related to energy efficiency. However, the council agenda contains motion to amend number 1, and we've talked with other council members, and including Cindy Lamb, who has motion to amend number 2. If you pass both of those motions, the concerns we have listed would be eased. LIBA does support both of those motions. We have 2 other concerns we'd like to raise with the ESCO resolution. It appears the city will only get paid back if the selected ESCO is in business 15 years from now. Therefore, the city should seek surety bonding from the contractor in order to protect the taxpayer. Our research shows that a contractor should be posting both a performance bond for the amount of service and guaranteed service bond as well. An even better option, much better option, in our opinion, would be to have the ESCOs get their own financing and let the banks take the risk, not the taxpayers of Lincoln. The federal government requires ESCOs to finance the upfront costs according to their 2015 Government Accounting Office, GAO, report. I'd gladly forward that to you if you want as well. Regarding the use we heard today of COP bonding, we would oppose that vigorously. LIBA also asked the city to establish a rigid ESCO energy saving performance contract, also known as the ESPC. The assumption that the city taxpayers will be paid back with savings is risky. If we use a 5,000 square foot office space as an example, the ESCO can claim that the city changed the use of the office space during the 15-year payback period, thus negating any savings. Many changes can take place to an office space over 15 years, such as adding staff or adding new technology, which is changing all the time. And new technology can add heat to a room. The federal government has used ESPCs to finance improvements. However, a 2005 GAO report said that they had uncertainties about whether savings are appropriately covering the costs. And their 2015 report said a few ESCO contractors were blaming the government for not properly maintaining equipment, thus reducing the amount of measurable savings. Other departments had savings that, quote, ranged from negligible, end quote, to around half of what was proposed. Finally, ESCOs are a way to exceed government spending lids and can also be used as a way to circumvent a vote of the people for projects that are extremely large, $20, $30 million projects that might normally have a public bonding vote. Therefore, we believe the City Council should maintain a very strong oversight position regarding the use of ESCOs. I thank you for your time.
Questions? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify on this item?
Hi, I'm Ronald Geary, 6411 Monticello Drive, Lincoln, Nebraska. I am the owner and operator of an engineering firm here in Lincoln, and we have been involved with ESCOs in public school districts over the years. And I guess I had just basically 3 points that I wanted to bring up. Number one, I think that Cindy Lamb's amendment is a good idea. I think that the council needs to be involved with the projects and know what the projects are, just for transparency, and going forward knowing what the projects are. The second point, in the small print of the fact sheet, says that existing capital improvement program budgeted dollars will be also utilized when such projects overlap and projects proposed through energy financing contracts leading to more practical CIP in future years. I'm not sure what all that means. I read it to mean that you can bundle projects together, and Mr. Green had mentioned your lighting projects with other maybe long-term payback projects. I would discourage that. I think that you need to look at the projects individually, and where the resolution says a 15-year project, that all of the projects need to be limited to the 15-year payback, so you're not trying to blend marginal projects in and have your lighting system pay for all of this. I think that needs to be evaluated and implemented independently. The other thing that we have seen in ESCOs that has happened is that the boards have decided to package other non-related issues. For example, I've seen carpet, ceiling tiles, and fire sprinkler systems all added to the ESCO project. And I encourage you to at least monitor that and make sure that that doesn't happen in these ESCO projects that the city moves forward with. Okay. Third, I don't see anything in the resolution indicating how these projects are going to be monitored. The money paid back. Typically what we see, and Kobe mentioned that, is that if a building, energy conservations are made in a building, the building use will change many times over the life of the building. Also technology, if you watch the curve on LED lights, lamps are getting much more efficient and the cost is going down. So just being able to monitor that, monitor how this money is getting paid back. A lot of times we just see that we have seen the school boards, okay, we're saving this energy, but and the dollars for the energy, it's not being put back into any fund. They're just spending it on other things such as buses and salaries and such like that. So I feel that there needs to be something in here that indicates how these systems are being monitored. Any questions?
Cindy?
Thank you for coming forward, sir. I had a question for you about the concerns about the payback and the change in the use and technology. So in your work with ESCOs, has it been your experience that then the shorter payback period is the more likely you are to avoid questions about measuring savings over time?
Well, what we've seen is the shorter payback projects end up helping pay for the longer term projects, if that was your question.
So no, I think my question is separate. Like if you had a lighting project, for instance, and there was some mention of and it was a 2-year project instead of a 5-year project or a 15-year project, then is it easier to avoid the problems that can come with trying to figure out what was the changed use of the building and technology and so forth?
Yes, the lighting projects are fairly simple, as Mr. Green indicated. They're pretty simple calculations. When you get into the HVAC control systems and use of your building, there's a lot of changes in technology. The life expectancy of a chiller may be 15 to 20 years, and so the equipment that you may be putting in under the ESCO, the life of the equipment may not even, needs to be replaced before it's paid for itself. So that's things you need to look at.
Thank you.
Okay, John?
You know, looking at the ongoing monitoring, on your second point, I think you addressed a little bit there. I've read the GAO reports that have been referred to here, and one of the comments they made at the federal level was that staff changed, a 15-year career or something, the same people aren't around, or just kind of people forget to do that, and as a result, the review process loses a lot of its integrity and the whole accountability to it. I don't know, do you have any observations on that?
I have never seen in a school district where the school district has ever gone back on an ESCO and said, hey, you didn't meet your criteria that you set forth. Because I don't think that it is followed or done. They don't have the staff. No one's looking at the utility bills every month to know, hey, we're not saving the money. They might do it for a year, they might do it for 2 years, but over the life of the project, it's just simply not done. So if you go forward with ESCO, probably what you should do is say, okay, they said we were going to save that money. We take their word for it, and by gosh, we're saving that money. Because I don't think there's a way to ever go back and audit it, or it would be a very highly detailed, costly audit to follow that.
Well, I think the state law that authorized municipalities to do this has a certain requirement there that an independent engineer or something look at that, and that it just, the farther you get on things, it seems like you have less control on it, or at least less feedback. And I guess one of my concerns boils down to, I don't want to create a bureaucratic system here that takes a lot of time on staff to go through all of this. As Ms. Raybould and I have noted, and Mr. Green, that with the payback on streetlights, I think that may be a no-brainer. I like the idea of getting a bid, whether it's ESCO or you just pay direct, and see what it is, because there's got to be a margin of insurance put in there by the ESCO vendor, and that's just understandable. I know in business we would do things differently and just try to get the most into the hard asset versus the soft dollars. And
is there a question there?
He's getting there.
Wondering,
He's getting there.
Yeah,
Okay, you're working up to a question?
getting there.
Okay.
Just any
He's winding
observations
up.
you have on that? It just, is there a time and a place for an ESCO, a time and a place just to do it in your budget process and pay for it?
That's, I think, kind of up to you to decide where
On us decide till it's
where
all
it
at
is.
the back end.
LED lights are kind of a no-brainer because of the efficiency. LES, up until this year, has offered incentives for replacing LED lights. They no longer have that incentive to commercial building owners because they feel that the LED lighting industry is supported enough and everybody realizes the energy savings that they don't need the incentive from LES to do that. So if you're asking about LED lights and what the city should do, they should probably just do it on your own. There's no reason to wrap that up into an ESCO.
Okay, thank you very much. Would
Right,
anyone else
thank
like to testify on this item?
Winston, you go ahead and testify and sign in afterwards.
Okay. All right. I have written testimony. And I won't read it because I know that you all can read. And so, but I will state, my name is Ken Winston, and I live at 4021 Terry Lane here in Lincoln, Nebraska. And I'm appearing on behalf of Nebraska Interfaith Power and Light today. And basically, I'll just talk about the first couple of things about Nebraska Interfaith Power and Light. That we're one of 40 state affiliates of a national coalition of faith leaders working to address climate change. We're nonpartisan and non-sectarian. Our primary focus is on addressing climate change and the causes of it. And one of the things that I mention is the importance of wisdom in our decision making. And that's common to many faith traditions. And I guess I'm going to go back and talk just a little bit about a bit of personal experience. Back in the 90s, I was on the Lincoln School Board. And in that time, we built some new schools. And before we built our 4 elementary schools with I believe it was the 1993 bond issue, no one had used ground-coupled heat pumps for a school system. It wasn't done. The same kinds of debates that you're having today were had at that time about that idea. It was like, why would you do that? That's crazy. Nobody's figured out how to do that. But the thing was, we tried it out and saved lots of money and saved lots of energy. And basically, that's what we're talking about here. This is an idea that could save the city of Lincoln a lot of energy and a lot of money. Now, all of the school systems, all the school buildings in Lincoln and across the country, it's the model, use ground-coupled heat pumps. They save millions of dollars every year. And that money can be used for everything, to buy books and computers and pay teachers. In the same way that you can save money here, and you save energy here, that money can be used for whatever else the city of Lincoln wants to spend it on. Now the main idea, and I haven't heard anybody say that an ESCO doesn't work, but the main idea is it avoids the upfront costs of investing in it. And as I understand it, the idea is that the energy company makes the investment and that they get paid out of the energy savings. So that's the idea. So let's give it a shot. And if they don't do that, then they don't get paid. That's my understanding, or they lose money on the project. So, so I hope it doesn't get bogged down in ideas about, well, lighting. Well, why would you do an ESCO for lighting? It doesn't make any sense. You would do it for long-term projects. You'd do it for things that would have long-term payback. That's the idea of this resolution. And then I guess I just wanted to also talk a little bit about a couple points I make in my written testimony. We have a heritage of conservation, and we also have conservative values. I mean, I don't know, I mean, a lot of people consider me a liberal, but by golly, my mom was as conservative as anybody in this room, I'll tell you. And she also believed in conservation. And so what is the point of all this? Well, we need to reduce our energy usage. That's consistent with our heritage of making the best use of the resources we have. It's also consistent with our heritage of saving money so that we can provide benefit to our taxpayers. And then reducing greenhouse gas emissions. That was another thing that my parents did, and their parents. They sacrificed so I could have a better life. Right now, we're not doing a very good job of that. We're leaving the world in a pretty crappy state for our children and grandchildren. We need to start reducing our greenhouse gas emissions so they've got a world they can live in. And this is a tool that can help get us there. Thank you.
Questions? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Next testifier, please. And as John said, you can testify first and then sign in afterwards.
That would be good. Good afternoon, Chairman Christensen and council members. My name is Marilyn McNabb, and I live in 1701 West Rose Street, and I'm speaking for the Citizens Climate Lobby today. As you can guess from our name, our concern is climate, and as was the case with the previous speaker, our priority is things like energy efficiency, which make possible the reduction of greenhouse gases, and it's also absolutely the cheapest way to reach that goal. A visiting scholar visited Creighton a couple weeks ago, who was formerly worked at NASA, works with the Scripps Institute of Oceanography and the Pontifical Academy of Sciences, and he talked about the urgency of climate change solutions. He warned about tipping points, but he also was encouraging, saying that solutions exist and there is still time. Energy efficiency is one of those solutions. I speak a little bit here for myself. The proposal here is to use an ESCO to identify potential savings. I've listened to a number of years of city budget discussions that the mayor organizes with heads of departments, and I have frequently heard them talk about the deferred maintenance that is very frustrating to them. They know that they should be doing it, but they don't have the budgets for it. This is one of the best things that ESCOs do, is that they can address that kind of problem and do a long-term, even 15-year or 17-year or more, because the city of Lincoln, Nebraska is still going to be here, and really tackle those kinds of problems. It makes a sense to me to hire the expert staff, because that's really what you're hiring, is experts. You don't have them on your staff now. They'll guarantee the savings each year. The Trade Association for ESCOs says that in their 35 years of existence, the members have made $33 billion in infrastructure improvements in just the public sector. These are very well-tested operations. They have worked other places. When I got out of law school, I went to work in the Nebraska Energy Office. We were talking about ESCOs then. That was in the mid-'80s. I'm old. I mean, it was a long time ago. The idea of them and the reality of them have been in operation, very successful. I would say if you have doubts, you could call some of those places that Frank listed that have made ESCO contracts. I'm almost certain that they will be very happy with their decision to have done that. So thank you for your time.
Other questions? Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Okay, would you care for a rebuttal?
Frank Ularich, Sustainability Legal and Compliance Administrator. I first take issue with Marilyn's statement that there's no experts. I'm just trying to figure out what I'm an expert at yet.
I see. I take it back.
Thank you, Marilyn. To Mr. Green's oversimplification of the process for the audits and the streetlight program, I'd say a gross oversimplification as a minimum. There's quite a bit of design elements involved in that I'm sure an 8th grader would not be able to execute in a timely manner. And I also have to wonder, he's questioning the paybacks, but there's communities across the country that are doing streetlight LED conversions that have paybacks greater than 15 years, but they are still recognizing the benefits and moving forward with them. Literally hundreds and thousands of streetlights have been installed, maybe approaching millions now of LED conversions when you consider all the big metropolitan facilities and large and small communities as well. But again, I certainly take issue with that oversimplification of the process. Kobe, thanks for your contributions, and I think I understood you're supportive of the proposed amendments. Surety bonds are a part of every standard contract for the ESCOs, which are incorporated in every template we've seen. We intend to fully utilize those. And I think Kobe also pointed out some of the issues and challenges with monitoring and verification. Look, it's not a simple process. For streetlights, it's a very straightforward, which is why we want to start with that, because it's something to easily monitor and verify. Yes, certainly chains and even if the audit's performed and there's 2 shifts operating, you go to a 3-shift, more energy use, so forth, then your guarantee is adjusted or corrected. So a lot of M&V issues that we need to sort through, but if there's something that's too awfully complicated, we're just going to pass on something like that, where we don't believe we'll see that savings or be able to verify it in time. So again, my thought on the whole M&V approach is to KISS, keep it simple, seniors and senioritas. So Ken, Winston, thanks for your comments on the ESCO financing. I think your understanding of the model was the ESCO provided financing, and that is one option, but as Brandon has articulated, probably lower on our consideration at this point. And believe that's about all I had. I would like, if time allows, Peter Henkel with Schneider Electric is here and can probably articulate more on some of the gaps and the questions if we're so willing, and if Peter would care to come up and entertain questions. I've known Peter for a couple of years and find him to be very upstanding, knowledgeable in the industry, and a straight shooter, so I'm sure you'll get the same answers from him.
Yeah. So generally, this would be considered out of order, but I'll allow it because I'll consider it part of your rebuttal, but usually a testimony from a different person is not part of the rebuttal.
And then I can keep it short and sweet, and obviously I'm not even dressed to address council, so I apologize for not wearing my tie and coat. But, certainly I think a lot of the points that are made are valid. I mean, I'm not going to sit up here and tell you that lighting isn't something that you could do inside of a room like this. It's the complexity as you start to go to scale that really ESCOs add value on. You're talking on the streetlights, for example, 26,000 streetlights, 26,977 to be exact. You've got 31,000. You've made a dent in that over the past 5 or 10 years, 2 LED. This is completing that process. But it's not 26,977 of the exact same streetlight. It is 96 different line items. It's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of lines of code, if not thousands, that our team has gone through to try to even identify where are those streetlights within your GIS platform. So when you start to simplify it down to it's just a simple calculation, that does make it sound like we don't really do a whole lot. And I'll be honest, our engineers would rebuttal that probably even better than I could. It takes a lot of time to develop these programs and these projects. The other point I'll make, kind of in reference to the savings, the savings is guaranteed. And the reason you went through the qualification process and the reason that the administration and the mayor's office went through the qualifications process is because you wanted to find the best of the best. And you found 5 great ESCOs that provide you and meet that criteria. I can't speak for them, but I can certainly speak for our firm. Schneider Electric has completed a little over 700 projects now across the country. We've written checks to a little over 40 of our clients. Those are shortfall checks. So that means when we don't make our savings, we monetarily make it up so that client, whether it's a school district, a municipality, or even the federal government, that they can be made monetarily whole. And so when you talk about the value that we bring, it's really not just about the scopes of work, whether that's changing a boiler or changing a light. It really goes down to the risk transfer of what we're trying to provide across this entire process. And so to that, I'll either sit down or you tell me what you want me to do.
Gene?
How long has Schneider Electric been in business?
We've been in business a little over 23 years as an energy services company, but our founding company was back in the late 1800s when we first started.
And Ken, if we move forward with an ESCO, can we establish the parameters of what we want that ESCO to take on? Basically, large, long-term projects, not, we all know people who do facility management and maintenance know it's a no-brainer just to replace the fluorescent lights with LED lights. We know that's a no-brainer, and you don't need a lot of engineering studies to tell you how to do that.
Right.
But, as part of the ones that you've been involved in, do you segregate, this category is LED lighting, this is very simple, this is very standard, most companies are doing it anyway on their own, most buildings, most municipalities are embracing this and getting it done, as the Public Building Commission has been doing for a number of years in all of the parking garages, et cetera. Is that possible to segregate that?
I would say it's up to you guys how you want to run your program, both mayor's office and the city council. I will say that the value we create in those kind of circumstances, when we sit down and we say this line item has a 5-year payback or this line item has a 35-year payback, it goes back to that conversation of the balancing act between all of them. Most municipalities I work with do not have a budget to replace every single light over the course of a 2 or 3 year period. And most of the times when they put that budget in place, what often happens is, we're all aware, a priority comes, an emergency, something breaks, dollars start to be diverted from that line item that was in their CIP to other items that are of more importance. Changing out these lights today, is it something you have to do? Absolutely not. They're going to probably come on tomorrow. However, the efficiency gains and the savings really help to justify the replacement of some of those other large capital improvement needs, like a boiler that maybe has a 15 or a 25 or however long-term payback it might have. Using that with the lighting is where you start to get under that 15-year payback, and that's when you start to see and have those discussions. Throughout any of our IGA processes that we take place with a city, whether it's Lincoln or anyone else, we have iterations where we discuss, what do you want to get out of this program? What's the value that it creates? But also on a line item by line item, look at all these different scopes that we could do and now help us funnel into what you want to try to accomplish in this program. I don't know if that totally answers the question, because I don't know if I can tell you exactly how it would all be handled. But certainly, if you want to ever have a conversation with us about what we do and how we do it, we are more than open to have those conversations.
Okay, Cindy.
Thank you. So you mentioned your shortfall checks that you wrote. And do you have a standard period of time after which you write shortfall checks? Is it something you assess on an annual basis generally, or you do it at the end of the project?
So it kind of leads to a question or a comment that was made before. A lot of these smaller ESCOs he was 100% correct, do not have a back-end staff to handle any sort of measurement verification. It's a contractual agreement, it's this or it's that. At Schneider Electric, and again, I can only speak for my firm, we have about 60 or so engineers and dedicated professionals whose sole job it is to monitor and maintain your savings. So when you talk about it in terms of when we do it, from the moment that contract's complete and that clock starts ticking from a completion standpoint on the installation, that's when that 1-year M&V period begins. And sometimes that M&V period is 10 years, sometimes it's a full 15. It's really up to the entity and how they want to structure that process. But I would say, we do a quarterly check. For example, if it was a building project, they're in there on a monthly basis looking at your controls, looking at run times, making sure that we can see the savings. We also look at it from a main meter perspective. So a meter that comes into this building, we're using that as our baseline to establish what the current costs are, as well as what the future costs are going to be and how much we can guarantee and save. And so by having those kind of checks and balances with us internally, we make sure that we can try to hit those savings and those dollar amounts at a yearly reconciliation period that we would typically have with any client.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question for Frank.
Okay. We're going to go, because you were just here talking.
Thank you.
John, then Jane.
Yes, thank you for coming.
Yep.
If we came to you and said, give us a bid on an ESCO or we're going to pay for it, what would be the difference in what you would respond with on a budget?
I don't know if I understand. Give me a bit on an ESCO.
We're going to replace 26,975 streetlights.
Mm-hmm.
What would you charge me just outright? Forget the ESCO. I come to you and Schneider, what would you charge us for?
Well, I don't manufacture the streetlights, and then.
No, but you're going to be our general contractor for it.
Correct. So I'd charge you the same amount, I guess, as if it's an ESCO or a turnkey project. Is that what you're trying to ask for?
I want to know what the difference is.
Well, the difference from an ESCO to like a design build process really comes down to the guarantee of those savings. It's the risk transfer and doing all the work up front to make sure that, so that you guys can see the savings that we're guaranteeing.
So what do you think that risk costs?
Oh, off the top of my head, I don't know exactly what a fair price would be. I can certainly have a conversation and give you kind of numbers for a project we've done recently or a completed project, if that would help.
Well, it sounds like with Mr. Green's experience in lighting, I guess wholesaler, contractor, that he's saying 3 to 4 years payback on energy. Wouldn't we kind of be smarter that we just say, go ahead, Schneider, you replace 26,975 streetlights? Is that the right number?
Yeah.
26,977, but who's counting, really?
Okay. Well, I was off 2.
You're close.
Yep, Mr. Landis,
Yeah.
while you're, okay. Anyway.
Those two are bad while you're
My point
talking.
is, if it's a 3 or 4 year payback, why don't we just do it, and then in year 4, those energy savings we can use on other projects?
Well, I think that,
Come out with a profit.
I think it goes back to the simplification of the process, right? I mean, if you're talking about streetlights and a $50 light bulb that you can replace, sure, that's an option. Fortunately, LES and kind of the process that they've gone through, they have very strict standards that we're having to adhere to. So we're talking even about roadway luminaires, they're nowhere near $50 to replace. When we're talking about more expensive, like decorative type fixtures, it goes back to even kind of that boiler conversation. It extends out the overall payback period because you're talking about full fixture replacement, not just replacing just a luminaire. So it becomes fairly expensive. You know, some of just the fixtures alone for the project, for the streetlight project, for example, are over $1,000 just for that fixture. And so it's not as if we're trying to shortchange by, I think what he's referring to for the $50 price is a screw-in bulb. Well, LES hasn't approved that. And so that's not something we can even consider because of the dark sky and some issues that they have with how that light is distributed from those lamps.
We own the LES, so we can tell them what to do.
Yeah, no, I understand. I'm just kind of giving you the parameters that we're playing in terms of the complexity of this process, and it's not just, you know, unscrew these lamps in here and replace.
Well,
as
maybe
it
we
would
do
be.
the low-lying fruit and get 90% of the savings versus those ornamental ones. I mean, that's been a challenge, and I've already had citizen residents say, I don't want LED in the brightness of my neighborhood. Who do I talk to at the city to keep my ornamental lighting? I know the city's paying the utility, but I think it seems to me, I mean, and I come from a business perspective, that there are ways that we can cut through some of this bureaucracy, help you win, help us win, get the job done, and then have monies that we can apply elsewhere to get other energy savings or whatever. I think you even talked about the longer-term projects. And so, you know, I agree with Jane on the LED replacement, streetlights, but it seems like we can simplify some of that and see where the real accountability comes in that. It seems like the ESCO has overhead within it, you know, the risk factor, and you know, you can't identify that. I mean, is it 10%, 20? There's something there because you want to protect yourself.
I'm going to recognize Jane.
Frank, the way you've envisioned this, do you anticipate like isolating the common sense things that the Public Building Commission is doing on a routine and regular basis? You know, we've been changing out fluorescent lights to LEDs throughout all the buildings routinely. Is that going to be off the table for this consideration? Because that is a low-hanging fruit, and that has a great payback. That's, I guess, I'm trying to understand where we're going. Are we going just for long, large projects like street lamps, and all the other stuff that is fluorescent to LEDs is not going to be on the table?
And quite honestly, those preliminary audits, they kind of divide up, you know, the lighting, HVAC controls. There's 7 or 8 different categories, including weatherization, weather stripping. There's cost estimates, there's paybacks. And much to the chagrin of ESCOs, because I've been working with them for 2 years trying to move these things forward, people are starting to pick up and, you know, changing some light conversions and so forth. But again, we don't have the maintenance staff or the budget to pursue those in an aggressive manner.
Okay, but the Public Building Commission does do that for the city and for the county. So that's why I'm really struggling with this. It's another layer of government government is already doing this work. And I believe in the bigger long-term investment in projects that will have that energy savings. That's above and beyond routine, regular facility management, project management, and so on. I really struggle with giving them, you know, open arms to do all this stuff when it's just common sense property management and maintenance that the Public Building Commission is already in charge of and doing at this point in time.
Right, and I can't explain, well, you know, like I mentioned, you got a Rod Hendrickson that's doing a lot of that out at the MSC and other buildings, but I can't explain why we haven't kept up, so to speak, with the PBC and your preventative maintenance and servicing. And all I can figure is a resource issue, or we're just not aware of the spend and the opportunity.
But if we can do the internal financing, and that's a mechanism that the city has at its disposal, there's no reason why the capital investment or capital improvement program presented by the Public Building Commission can't be enhanced.
And I would love to have staff to run that program.
Okay. Very good. Benny?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just briefly, I'm still struggling with this. The smaller, cheaper projects we're already talking about, you're already authorized to do most of those, right? And then these are just for the bigger ones? Is that too oversimplified?
Well, and if we take lighting, for example, which is a no-brainer in many cases, you have to wonder, well, why haven't we done that? But when you take away lighting, you take away from the packaging of larger projects to get us a decent capital improvement program.
So what I'm hearing, though, is you're going to use the no-brainer lighting things to leverage projects that would not be viable in any other situation, because the payback would be far too long.
Well, viable in any other situation, I'm not sure I'd go with
Viable
that.
on their own, standalone projects that would not meet the test, meet the test when you combine them with lighting.
Right.
And to me, I'm with Jane here on this. I don't understand why you want to use the low-hanging fruit and those opportunities that we can already take advantage of without an ESCO to then leverage that money into a bigger project that could not stand on its own 2 feet.
Well, many of those projects are already committed to in the CIP in the next couple of years.
The CIP is a wish list. It's not a commitment.
It is in the first 2 years funded.
First 2 years it is.
Okay, and I would just say to you, Mr. Christensen, that with the way we do this, if the amendment is adopted, you can make that point when the ESCO comes before you, if you feel like a portion of it should not be there. I would only point out that what Mr. Hinkle said that I think is really important here is that it's an assumption that we have money for the projects. And really what we're relying is on future savings. And we're asking them to guarantee that future savings. So it's a little difficult to suggest that, that there isn't some value in having that kind of expertise to help us get there. Mm-hmm. We really do not have that expertise, and in some cases, we don't necessarily have the money.
Okay. All right. Other questions? Well, let's wrap this up then. Well, that was the rebuttal, sir. I'm sorry. If you have things you would like to tell us?
Just to correct a couple things.
No, we can't. We can't. Sir, we've closed public testimony. That was the rebuttal phase. I apologize to you for that, but it's my job as chair to make sure we follow the rules. So, and then we will be here afterwards if you want to tell us, but by then the vote will have been taken. So, next item, please.
All right, next is item 18, approving an amendment to the mechanical systems permit fee schedule adopted by Resolution A-90638 on August 21st, 2017, to correct the gas piping replacement appliance fee and add a fee for commercial cooking recirculating system.
Hi there. I really hope this item is less complex than the previous one, and I think it will be. Essentially, this item does two things. Like Teresa mentioned, it adds a permit fee for the types of installations that this board approved last week, the commercial cooking recirculating system. So that's the $40 fee, which will go into effect, I believe it's Wednesday, next week, actually.
So what you're saying is, now that we've approved these auto fryers, we're going to tax them.
But at a less rate than Omaha does.
Very good. Very good. Okay.
Yes, that is the fee. It's in the same fee schedule as type 1 hoods, new ductwork, and other mechanical type systems. And it is $40, and like I said, it is about $16 cheaper than what Omaha charges for the same idea, or for the same service. And briefly, what's covered, they still have to verify ventilation requirements that are occur in the mechanical code, and also have to ensure that everything's installed per mechanical, or per installation stuff.
Okay.
You don't want to hear any more, John?
No.
Okay.
I think John
Okay.
wants to
Do we
ask
have
a
any-
question.
Any questions? Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
All right, we'll go into our public hearing ordinances, second reading and related resolutions. Item 19, approving an amendment to the Lincoln Municipal Code, Section 8.26.040, to change the date from September to October for the Health Director to report nuisance abatement costs to the City Council.
Yes, hi, good afternoon, Chair Christensen and members of the council. I'm Shavonna Loster, the Health Director of the Lincoln Lancaster County Health Department, which you already know that, but for the public. And so basically, what we're asking to do is, according to the nuisance, Section 040, it requires us to report all real estate cleared of public nuisance by September 15th of each year. And what we're asking to do is to move that to October 15th to allow the people who we who are cleaning up their abated properties late in August 31st, they're also included in that list, and it's not really giving them enough time to turn it around by September when we have to report to you. And so we would like to change that date to October 15th to allow them the opportunity to abate their property and not be included on that list of properties for you to consider.
Okay, questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next item, please. Is this going to be yours too?
It's going to be mine too,
All
yes, sir. So this one, I'm going to call up Justin.
We have to have her read
Oh,
it
I'm so
first.
sorry, Teresa.
That's
Go ahead.
okay. Item 20 is approving an amendment to the Lincoln Municipal Code, Chapter 8.20, Lincoln Food Code, to add new sections on cleanup of vomiting and diarrheal events, hand washing signage, and food handler permit requirements. You made me read it.
Yes. So I'm going to call up Justin Daniel, if I may. He's our disease prevention supervisor to talk about this ordinance more in detail.
All the things we never knew we would discuss as
Yes.
elected
I
officials.
talked about this as a report a couple of months.
Good evening, members of the council. My name is Justin Daniel. I supervise the food safety program, which encompasses disease prevention, as Shavonna mentioned. So tonight, just like to introduce some new code language to our city food code to what we feel better protects the public and also provides procedures for food employees in the food establishments to know how best to clean up any vomiting or diarrheal type incidents that may occur at facilities. So when this took place, we did an audit of our code with FDA Standard 1, and kind of to get started, we we had a questionnaire for 149 managers and food establishment persons in charge, and what we found out is about half of the food establishments already have. Actually, 56% of the food establishments already have procedures available to clean up vomiting and diarrheal incidences, and about half already have the cleanup kits. So to have these procedures and have the kits available, we feel provides a higher level of protection for the food employees and also the public to help reduce the spread of any incidences, illnesses that can be spread through vomitus, such as norovirus specifically. So,
Okay. Jane?
Yeah.
No, just, I thought you had more to say.
Yeah, we took this language forward to our Food Advisory Committee. That was approved on November 9th. In addition, we had 3 public meetings in the month of December where 14 people attended. And then as a result of those public meetings, made a few tweaks to the code language, but continued on, took it forward to our Board of Health in January where it was unanimously approved by our Board of Health. So, thank you, Councilman Shobi. Yeah.
I have a question, but I don't want to keep interrupting you until you're ready for a question, sorry.
Okay. In addition, code language to be introduced is just to require signage at sinks used for food or for hand washing, just to have signage to remind food employees to wash their hands, periodically while doing food service. And the other thing with the code language is an exemption for temporary food servers. During a routine policy review, we've had this practice since I can remember. I've been with the health department for 19 years, and we've had a policy where for these large events such as Rib Fest or the air show, large volunteer groups will volunteer their time to assist with the food vending. So as long as those volunteers are educated in safe food handling practices, they've signed a form indicating they haven't had vomiting or diarrhea within the last 2 days. Per our policy, we allowed that. So in having a routine policy review and talking with legal during that policy review, we feel it's a better place to have in our code, that food handler exemption in our code versus as a policy. So, thank you.
All right, Jane.
So Justin, I'm reading some of the requirements that you're saying the food establishments have to maintain a bodily fluid cleanup kit.
Mm-hmm.
And at a minimum, the kit shall include eye protection, respiratory protection, disposable gloves, barrier gown, coagulating agent, disinfectant, paper towels, disposable scoop, biohazard bag, and a garbage bag. I have to tell you, with our grocery stores, my brain is going, I can't imagine people donning a barrier gown and a mask as they routinely clean up incidents in, clean up in aisle 4. This happens.
Yeah.
So I mean, did the Board of Health talk about each of these elements that they're requiring food establishments to keep in a kit? That someone has to get the kit out and don all this gear to just do the normal and customary cleanup?
No, I want to know, do I answer or do I? I know the answer
Okay.
to this, but he's the one that's testifying, right?
Well, I guess,
We did discuss this at length, and the availability of the kits and the cost of the kits. And can you answer that one, or should I keep going?
From what I found for the cost of the kits, on average, about $25 for a complete cost to provide those types of protections to the food establishment, anything from $20 to $25.
so that's for every incident that happens in an establishment, they have to don this gear to clean it up?
It has to be available.
I would
Okay,
say
so-
norovirus takes very small amounts, so it really is to protect, that worker and also the spread. It can spread very quickly, and then you'd have a whole store of people sick coming into the store. If it's not cleaned up properly, it can stay on surfaces.
But how is a person in a food establishment to know that's norovirus, or some child that ate too much candy and just was walking down the aisle and just...
You won't, and that's the thing. You
That's
won't know
right.
what it is.
So-
And so it's
Assume
a
the
safety.
So I guess my question would be this. Let's say this passes and the store or the restaurant has an incident, because it's going to happen,
It's going to happen.
and the employee just goes out there, doesn't don all the gear, and just cleans it up. And and is that some kind of enforceable infraction?
Well, our thing in enforcement is so the food managers, employees have the procedures readily available, so they know what the corrective actions to take to best protect them and to best protect the public while, should an incident like that happen. As far as contents of the bodily fluid cleanup kit, and not only in Board of Health, we had 2 food advisory committee meetings that covered this, and eventually come up with these contents required for the kit. Yes.
So would a food establishment be penalized if they don't have and demonstrate that they have these kits on the premises?
During routine inspections, we would look for that. Yes.
And the next question is, if someone says, hey, they didn't use the kit, is that a penalty too? They have the kit.
Yeah.
They didn't use the kit.
Yeah, we would have to address that. Odds are we'd get it as a complaint, and then we would follow up with the management and address the proper procedures for cleanup, proper procedures
So,
for protecting them.
The way I can see this playing out, just knowing people as people, businesses all buy a kit, and everybody knows you just don't use the kit, just go clean it up. And the kit's there for inspections. Isn't that the way people really behave?
Until something happens, or until there's a big foodborne outbreak, and then in our investigation, we find out that, they had these procedures weren't followed. That becomes a liability to the restaurant, because customers, like they do, when we have a foodborne outbreak, they want to know, was there something missed in that establishment that they should have done that contributed to me being ill? And so, that's...
Okay.
Council Rick Tass from Law Department. Nothing in the ordinance indicates that an employee has to don that equipment. And so therefore, if an employee didn't use that protective equipment that's required to be provided by the establishment, there's no action that the city could take on that part. This is very similar to, you can give your employee a vehicle that has a seatbelt and ask them to use it, but if they don't use it, that's not required by the code that's written. So the code just indicates that the facility, the establishment, will provide the kit so it's available to them.
Okay. Other questions?
Is that going to be considered a critical violation if you don't have that kit on the premises?
With violations with our city food code, we do categorize them as priority violations. Yes.
And so, what has been in force all these years until the requirement of a kit through all of?
We've had best practice recommendations that we have available, primarily in our child care program, but during our food manager trainings, we do teach on the cleanup of vomitous material to prevent the spread of illness.
But this is, in food establishments, don't they have best practices already to maintain the safety of the public if these incidents occur already? Has there been a lot of complaints, or have you isolated situations where a containment didn't occur, the appropriate procedures have not been followed? Is this rampant in our city? I have to be honest, I'm reading this, and I think it's just a little bit of over-regulation on something that happens a lot in many food establishments. And I feel if food establishments are not doing best practices, and I think that's what the committees probably should have talked about and come up with reasonable, normal, customary solutions to address a specific problem. But I think this is maybe a little excessive.
I think part of it too came from the survey results where over half of them, or less than half, didn't have any procedures at all to follow. And so, like we said, we took it to the Food Advisory Committee and our Board of Health, and we just, if our mission is to protect, promote and protect the health of the community, then that is, this is one measure in which we can ensure that when people are going out to eat or going into food establishments, regardless of what they may be, that there are some procedures in place, there's some measure of safety that we are ensuring that that those procedures are there for them to follow, for employees to follow.
Cindy.
Thank you. You mentioned 156 establishments already had some kind of a policy for cleanup or instructions to their.
No.
56%. Thank you. Did any of them have kits like you're explaining?
49.6% of them had kits.
Okay, and so where did they obtain their kits? How do they know about them?
In talking with them, a lot of the kits are provided through janitorial supply companies.
I see. So this isn't necessarily anything new to every establishment. But it can be separated from the policies. Like there's a requirement that they have a policy, and then there's a requirement they have a kit, but those two don't necessarily have to go hand in hand.
Well, the code indicates to have procedures available for
Right.
cleanup, but then section B would be to have a kit available also.
Right.
So you're requiring both?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank
And-
you.
Yeah.
Other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
All right, next is item 21, Comp Plan Conformance 18001, declaring approximately 0.15 acres of property generally located at 1233 Garden Valley Road as surplus property.
Good afternoon, Lynn Johnson with Lincoln Parks and Recreation. I'll let the Elmo come up here and explain what we've got.
Push the button. There you go.
There we go. This is a piece of property that the city owns that is on the west side of North 14th Street between I-80, and about halfway between I-80 and Alva Road. This kind of irregularly configured parcel was essentially gifted to the city a number of years ago in conjunction with this subdivision there. At that time, we thought that it might be possible for that area to be developed as a neighborhood park. There's an undefined drainage channel that courses through that piece of property, and one of the things that we've found over the last several years, and actually in particular the last couple of years, is that this piece of property regularly floods. And if it happened infrequently, it probably would work for a neighborhood park site, but it happens just often enough that we think that it limits access for family and children to use this site. And we actually have a better location that I'll show you here in just a second. When the city acquired this was gifted to the city, and we needed an access point. So we acquired this residential lot in this location to provide access to the area that we thought would work for a neighborhood park through this lot and from this area of the subdivision. Subsequent to that time, Lincoln Public Schools has developed Coosier Elementary, which is at the intersection of 14th Street and Alva Road. And there is now the opportunity, like we've done a number of times in Lincoln, to co-locate a neighborhood park with that school site. And so the action that is before the City Council this afternoon is a recommendation to declare the lot here that the city owns as surplus, offer it for sale, and utilize the proceeds from that sale towards the purchase of this piece of property from LPS that will then become developed as the neighborhood park in this area. And the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board reviewed this, and they've recommended that the City Council approve this action, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
I have a question.
Please.
Who would buy that?
No, I was thinking that.
Well, actually,
Not very big.
this is it looks tiny, but it's a standard residential lot. It's one of the standard residential lots in that subdivision, and essentially all of those lots, I think, with the exception of that one, or at least most of them, are built out at this point. So that is a standard residential lot, although it looks teeny tiny on that
I
image.
can testify to that because I live off of Middleton and Palmetto.
Okay, Jane?
Again, who would buy it if they know it routinely floods?
It's the lot will not. The lot is actually set up that it could be a walkout basement lot. So it actually slopes from Garden Valley Road down to this area below. The city will retain ownership of that lower area. It won't become a neighborhood park. It'll be a greenway. And it'll be managed essentially as open space.
So
Great question.
You're talking about adding a buildable lot here.
Exactly.
Do you have an anticipated cost?
That I may need a little bit of help with because I'm hoping that
What
urban development.
What are we going to make, Dave?
Well, it's dangerous to give you a number, but we would think someplace between $20,000 and $30,000, depending on location. But a buildable lot in this town would come into someplace in that category under normal circumstances.
Carl?
Yeah, Len, so the proposed park
space, is that city-owned already or LPS-owned or what?
It's currently owned by LPS, but we have a commitment from them to sell that piece of property to the city. This is a fairly common practice that we have with LPS, that as they're acquiring land for neighborhood park, we let them know whether we have an interest or not. They acquire enough land then for the school site as well as the park area, and then we purchase the property from them, typically using impact fees.
Okay. And my recollection, and I'm not sure you know about this, but to the west of the school and the park, we've had some issues before us previously about some development happening in that area. So, I mean, just saying it's a good place for a park.
Yeah, thank you. It's probably a little bit further north and east than we would like, but it seems to be well located, and children and families are used to getting to the school site, so we think they can easily find this park area as well.
Okay, other questions? Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to testify on this item?
Thanks very much.
I actually do just want to enter into the record a letter that came to the Planning Commission from a Diane White. She sent it at the time it went to the Planning Commission, who ruled unanimously in favor of the surplus property. She says that she lives in the Garden Valley neighborhood, just a few lots away, and it would be in the best interest for the neighborhood to have this lot declared surplus. There is no sidewalk, and it's the only area along the way that has no sidewalk, and so walkers, particularly because during weed growing season, and it's not particularly passable, they go into the street.
So
And
you
she
mean
says
the
for
city is
connectivity.
letting weeds grow on a piece of our property?
Apparently they have.
Goodness.
That's right. And my mower is broken, so it can't be me. But yes, anyway, something that you probably want to know.
Okay. All right, thank you. Would anyone else like to testify? Next item, please.
Next then are items 22 and 23, Comp Plan Conformance 18002, declaring approximately .17 acres of property generally located southeast of Northwest 48th and West Adams Street as surplus, and change of zone 18002, a change of zone from I-2 Industrial Park District to B1 Local Business District on property generally located at the southeast corner of Northwest 48th and West Adams.
Members of the City Council, David Landis, Urban Development Department Director, and the applicant in this case. This property came to us because of an LES substation that left this sort of high and dry as far as right-of-way. We don't have a known purpose for it. It is a strange piece of land. We don't know who would want to buy it, but it doesn't have a civic purpose. If an adjoining landowner wants to buy it, and I can see of one there, we would at least be able to sell it if it was on surplus status. And towards that end, both the Planning Department and the Planning Commission agreed that the right zoning is the one that's being asked to be changed to. It's, I don't see exactly what use one would make of it, but what we do know is it's not doing us any good. And that's the kind of thing that ought to be in the surplus property, so if somebody has a plan, they could step forward and we could sell it.
Cindy?
So if we declare this surplus without someone waiting to purchase it, does it go on the tax rolls and does the city have to pay tax on it?
No, we generally have gotten the assessor to agree that when we are doing that, we're trying to help the redevelopment process. So while there was a time when that was at risk, I don't think that will be the case in this situation, because I think there's been a change of heart as to what we're doing when we do that. We're not making money on it. It's not, you know, it's not like we're making profit. What we're trying to do is to move property into private sector hands to help development purposes, and that is a civic purpose. So that's what I think will happen.
Okay, other questions? Carl?
Yeah, this is an area where Northwest 48th Street has, that project has just been completed to Adams. But the plan, and Mickey, you might want to weigh in here. So the plan for Northwest 48th Street, if and when it happens, from the north, is to move to the east. And so I'm just wondering about that movement, where it'll go a block, the proposal at least, is to go a block or two
to the east. So starting that cut to the right, maybe through this property, I don't know what might be envisioned there.
I can give you this much information as Mickey reflects on it. We ask every other department,
Okay.
and we ask all other public entities like the county or the NRD, before we consider the idea of surplusing, to see if there is a governmental purpose. So we do that by giving notice of what it is. We send it out to all the departments, and it is quite common, not terribly common, but it is common for them to say, oh, wait a second. For example, the police have said that might be a good location for a police station, and we've held property for years for those purposes. That happened in this case, and it was sent out to every department. All I can tell you is that Public Works was sent that notice and gave us no indication that there was a purpose known for the land.
As you notice, the green place, just on the other side of Adams, that's drainage that was put in there, new drainage. And again, the roadway is supposed to go east of that drainage space. So to get from the current alignment on the other side of that drainage, I'm not sure how you do that exactly, or what the plan is. I'll take your word for it that Public Works has looked at this, but just think it needs to be on the record that potentially is an issue as that road is built out.
John?
Can you put that back, please? I think that's a perfect place for a roundabout, and that'll help. No, I mean, you don't hear me say that often, but I really believe it. It would help. You wouldn't have to acquire more land, and so this could be very valuable to Public Works.
I don't see Mickey jumping up and down saying yes. Okay, I have a question just on that.
I think I heard her agree.
That piece of property that's next to it. Do we know what use is being used for right now? Is it a business?
I believe it's a Casey's.
Ah, okay.
So they might, who knows? But it's, if you want to control your frontiers and your boundaries, and that is something that businesses would reflect on.
Okay.
Could be used for, maybe a better sign or a welcoming quality. At least it would be available.
Very good.
What we do know is we don't have any purpose for it ourselves.
Benny.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to talk to Mr. Councilman Estrich. Are you concerned that we're surplusing some property that we'll have to buy back in the future?
That was what I was wondering, but I didn't hear that was a concern. But
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Thank you. Anyone else want to testify on this item? Next item, please.
All right, next is item 24, Comp Plan Conformance 18004, declaring approximately 2,744 square feet of property generally located at 820 South 27th Street as surplus property.
David Landis, Urban Development Department, applicant. Surplus property, this time on South 27th Street. This is a nondescript parking lot that you may have noticed as you drive down 27th Street. The city did it years ago to help the neighborhood who had a very protective, loving relationship with Ideal Grocery. And so to help the situation, the city acquired and did this parking lot. It wasn't given to the grocery store. It was a city parking lot. We don't charge for it. We don't do anything other than maintain it and assume the legal liability for it. Ideal Grocery is not coming back. It doesn't get used much. It's property that whoever would want to develop in this area, and there are some developers looking at that area, will want to be able to control. We do not want to sell it simply to one person who walks in and makes us an offer. We want to hold it for the day in which somebody wants to do something in that area, but they can be assured the city could step forward and provide a piece of the puzzle. So I would say that we're being strategic here. It's not that we're going to, turn around and sell this to somebody else who then could be an inhibition for development because it was in somebody else's hands. But it is a piece we don't need, we do have liability for, we do have maintenance costs for, it makes no revenue, and it's not part of a city plan anymore that we know of, but it would be potentially an attractive feature to create momentum for redevelopment on that corner. That's why we bring it to you, and perhaps you'd agree with that strategy, and perhaps you won't. We'll find out.
Okay. Questions? Thank you, sir. Next item, excuse me, would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
Item 25, text amendment 18002, amending section 27.72.110 of the Lincoln Municipal Code relating to exceptions to the height requirements by including an exception for private schools.
Somebody want to talk about it?
Good evening. My name is Tim Gergen with the Clark Anderson Partners, representing this text amendment on behalf of the private schools of Lincoln. It is projected by the year 2040 that the city of Lincoln will grow to by almost 120,000 people. Most surely you're going to see an LPS bond issue coming out for new schools. You're going to see maybe 2 bond issues by that time. Also, what you're going to see is the city of Lincoln currently has 27 private and parochial elementary schools in Lincoln, serving 7,000 students. We are proposing a text amendment to increase the height limit of private schools to increase the density of the private school land to help offset the city of Lincoln growth. Instead of purchasing more schools, more private schools, we want to help intensify the existing land use for what we have on that. Our text amendment is to increase the building height by up to 10 feet and then also by up to 25 feet. And so when we increase the building height by 10 feet, we'll essentially increase the building setback to 50 feet from the property setback lines. And when the building height increases to 25 feet, we'll increase the building setback from the property line by 100 feet. We think by offsetting this larger distance, we'll offset any substantial differences that you're going to see in an increased building height. What we're going to present right now is kind of the current trend of LPS schools. This is the current Marilyn Moore Middle School out at 84th and Yankee Hill Road. Right now you'll see on this is a 3-story addition. What you'll notice is LPS is going to bigger, taller schools to offset the travel distance for the students classroom traversing the hallways. LPS is mindful of this. They are increasing the setbacks to, this is Yankee Hill Road under construction right here, by putting in a healthy green setback where the park or playing fields will be going. This is a more zoomed up version. I have architects Heather Keel and Jeff Chadwick here to kind of discuss the LPS trends, and then we'll kind of discuss the private school trends as well.
Jeff Chadwick with the Clark Anderson Partners. What you see on the image here is the new Marilyn Moore Middle School. Currently, can we go back to that one? The current school, roughly 750 feet long. In design, we started looking at how to make that as compact as possible, and that, as Tim said, was to look at stacking the pods, so 6th, 7th, and 8th are all in that stacked orientation, so it started to condense that floor plan. Without that, we would have had probably a plan that was maybe a little over 1,000 feet long. So being able to kind of concentrate that made a lot of sense. We're seeing in schools, current school design, looking at floor-to-floor heights that are increasing, somewhere in the 15-foot. This is actually a cross-section of the classroom pods. It's about 15-foot floor-to-floor, so if you do the math, we're right at 146 or 46 feet in height on that, which is above and beyond the current restrictions. Also, we're seeing in gymnasiums, this is two gymnasiums side by side, so the clear span starts to get fairly deep. So that starts to push up the height as well. So this is all about 136 feet in height at the edge wall.
So we'll have Heather start talking about a particular private school that brought us here today. This would be Pius, one of the more urban private schools in the city of Lincoln.
So Pius High School is currently a project on our boards, and it's what precipitated the discussion that brought us here to you today. And Pius is fairly landlocked in a residential area fronting on A Street. And what you're seeing here in plan view, thank you, Jeff, the property line is in red. The existing setback line is shown in yellow, 30 feet on the front and then 10 on the sides. And then as it relates to the incremental proposition in the text amendment, each setback with an additional 50 feet is, 50 feet is shown in green, and then the 100-foot setback is shown in blue. I don't know if you can see that very well. But essentially, as Jeff mentioned, in building design now, especially in schools with gymnasiums, but also classrooms, the owners and the curriculum is dictating large open spaces free of columns. And so when we have to have large spans without columns, we have to have deeper beams because they're going further and carrying more load, which is why our buildings used to be designed at 10 and 12-foot floor to floor, but now we're seeing closer to 14, 15, even 16 feet floor to floor. So in Pius's case, we're planning a classroom addition on the west side of the building, shown in black there. Probably don't need to show all of these, but this shows here from A Street, the 100 feet, how far set back this is and how far set back the school actually is from the legal requirements. And as we look at really creating an equal playing field for private schools in the city, this allows to build auditoriums for high schools, gymnasiums for high schools, where the existing codes in a residential area keep them at that 30 or 35-foot height. So it's really creating equity in facility design. Just so you can envision this is the plan, a rendering from December of that addition to the west there. And in this case, we were trying to keep it very small and compact so we didn't impact the parking and the fields. To get classrooms in the core building to have light, which has been proven to impact cognitive performances. We needed to extend that up and do clear stories, which you're seeing here, which brings daylight to the center of the building so we get borrow light for the students and teachers that are in the center of the building. So it's really important to the design. This shows the future. Again, this is just an eyewash drawing, I suppose, of what an auditorium may look like on the site. So that's a 44, 45 foot as taken from A Street. So you can see the visual impact when we set something far back.
At this point, we'd be happy to take any questions you may have.
Questions, Carl?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense to me. My only question is, why is this a private school issue? Because, I mean, you showed a brand-new middle school, but how about an existing school in an existing neighborhood that wants to follow the trends that
Sure.
Lincoln Public Schools are doing and build a three-story facility that they wouldn't be able to do that in this case now, would they?
Right, so the public schools do not have to follow the City of Lincoln zoning ordinances on that end. So this is more to.
It was only the university that got those kind of deals.
This is more to level the overall playing field on that end to help that.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank
Would
you.
anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
All right, next is item 26, Street and Alley Vacation 17011, vacating the 15-foot right-of-way adjoining the south sides of lots 7 and 8 of Sky Ranch Acres Edition, located on the east and west sides of Beechcraft Road.
Steve Henriksen for the Planning Department, also with Abby Luttrell from City Attorney. The applicants are here, but there was a letter sent to you earlier today that asked some questions in regards to the ownership of the property. And so in talking to the applicants, they were okay with us going first and trying to just clear up that matter. They are, of course, here to explain their reasons for the application. Basically, what we have handed out, and we also have here on the overhead as well, is the property that in question is being vacated is this 15-foot wide strip of right-of-way that is adjacent to Lot 7 and Lot 8. The lot owners are here for Lot 7 and 8. This is part of the Sky Ranch Acres development. It is south of Holdridge Street, east of 98th. This property for a long time the association thought was their property. And they thought that because this is the Sky Ranch Acres addition, and there was a first addition to the west. And on the property to the west, this 15-foot wide area was platted as an outlot with a pedestrian easement for the residents to walk on it. And so they had always assumed that this was also privately owned property, and they had their 15-foot easement on it as well. With a recent development called the Dominion to the south, in looking at this particular property, it came to our attention that this was actually platted as part of the right-of-way, and it was all connected to the right-of-way, and that's what we've tried to show here in the yellow, is that when this was originally dedicated to the county at the time, because it was outside of the city limits, that 15-foot strip was included as part of the right-of-way, and we verified that with our mapping division. We went over with city attorney in the office, agreed as well. But we didn't see any reason for the city to own that. So the adjacent property owners expressed an interest in owning it, but they were also very much fine with the idea of it continuing to be a path for the residents in the area. So they have already signed documents that will deed to the association ownerships, to all the property owners in this area, a 15-foot easement so that they can all continue to have that common pedestrian easement. So the right for this people who live in Sky Ranch Acres to walk on this will not be lost. It'll just simply transfer from public ownership to private ownership. They are aware it has a 15-foot easement over it, but they believe they have been maintaining it for some time. So that's kind of why it is in front of you, and some members of the association thought that they owned it. I'd probably have Abby talk a little bit more about the ownership and the dedication process.
Okay, so Steve did a nice job explaining. There's the drawing here, and as the planning department read how this is drawn, just by drafting standards, that this would be included in the public right-of-way. Also here, and this is from the final plat, you can see this meets and bounds description. The planning department also ran that, followed those meets and bounds, and it encompassed this area as well. There was another resident in the neighborhood who had a title search done, and I think you all received a copy of that. And that title search, apparently it reads, it's hard for me to glean much from this because there aren't dates or anything, but it says that the last grantee and last deed of record was this Mr. Christian Eden. The city's position would be that there was not a deed of record because the plat serves as the deed. When the plat gets filed from the inception of when this resident platway was created, it was deeded to, at that time, the county, and then when the city annexed it into the city. And that was, you can see the signature down here. They say it belongs to this Mr. Eden, and he's one of the signatures on the preliminary plat there. I just want to acknowledge there are some other, I would say, problems with this chain of title. There were a few more deeds. This one in 1974, which talks about some outlots. I don't think it does, but to the extent that this conveyed any property that was right of way, I would say that that's probably void. I would say that is void. Anything that had been conveyed back here at the first plat, that was a conveyance. There was another conveyance in 1978. This claims to convey the roads. This is kind of curious because it's not practice once a developer dedicates land as public right-of-way, there's no need to file a subsequent deed. So this is kind of an anomaly, and I spoke with the planner who works with county projects and also the county attorney who confirmed that it's not their practice to require a deed to convey roads after the plat is filed. This was also, signed by Mr. Eden, as was the previous deed. So they were all signed by the individuals that the title company is saying is the rightful owner. And just to close, and I can answer questions too, Planning Department looked at this and thought there's no reason for the city to hold this. When we vacate property, we quit claim that. And so when we quit claim that to the petitioners here, the adjacent property owners, all that we're doing is saying, to the extent that the city has an interest in this property, we are conveying that property to you. And we are making no promises about the condition of the title. Mr. Wellham, who wrote the letter to you, I think suggested some other alternatives. By quit claiming this property, the city in no way limits Mr. Wilhelm's ability to continue to fight to claim that the homeowners association or anyone else owns this. It just gets the city out of the picture. And the petitioners have been made aware of these other kind of title issues. So.
Other questions? Cindy?
Thanks for coming up today, because you're right, it was kind of clear as mud. But it's the documents that you showed us today seem to indicate that the estate still believed it had ownership. And you're saying that they did not have ownership. The estate does not have ownership.
Well, first, I would not characterize it as the estate saying it has ownership.
Mr. Eden.
Well, Mr. Eden is deceased. He did not request the title search. It was one of the neighbors at the homeowners association who requested the title search. And the title search, their conclusion was that the Eden estate owns the property. I would disagree with that conclusion, but again, we just received this morning, and so it's hard to tell what they're basing their conclusion on.
Okay, so I guess I'm looking at the document you gave us that was dated 1971, and you were indicating there was something where Mr. Eden transferred property or interest in the property in 1978. So he believed he still owned the property, and it was his to deed.
Well, I think that there are lots of problems with that. It says here that he deeded the roads when clearly he had dedicated the roads in the preliminary plat.
Okay.
Or in the final plat here. So there may have been at some point that Mr. Eden believed that he had retained part of that. I think from a legal perspective, that the preliminary plat controls.
Okay, and so all I'm wanting to make sure of, I understand that the city just wants out of it, but you mentioned that as part of getting out of it, we're going to quit claim to the adjacent property owners or budding property owners.
Correct.
And I'm wondering if we have the authority to do that.
The quit claim, I think that that this plat provides a good defendable position and provides reason to believe, for the city to believe that we own this property. The quitclaim deed only conveys what we have. So it conveys, we believe that it would be fee simple here. In the event that it's not, we would just, and we don't promise that with a quitclaim deed doesn't even promise to convey what it's conveying or that there's clean title.
Okay, so this gets us out of that and lets them look at who's the actual owner, whether the abutting property owners, whether we've deeded it to them or not, is not necessarily the deciding factor.
Correct.
And again, the association, we contacted them, and they're not opposed to this action.
Right.
Because they are going to be having the common access easement that allows them to continue to use it. They have talked to the property owners. The property owners are going to allow the association to continue to use it. That's why they signed the documents. They have paid for it. And to us, this is very clear all over when we've accepted thousands and thousands of plats where the right-of-way was dedicated to us and we didn't later get a deed for it. So we see no deed for these two 15-foot strips because they were part of the right-of-way. I will say this is rather unusual to have these little 15-foot strips, but we have found other circumstances where that was done. In Woodshire, there's a 10-foot pedestrian strip that is a part of the right-of-way. That's how it was platted in the 1900s. Patrician Heights, which is up North 56th Street, is another example where there's a 10-foot walkway and it was part of the right-of-way. Rather unusual way of doing it, but that's the way it was final platted, and that's the way this was final platted in 1972 as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you very much. Would somebody else like to testify on this item? Please come forward.
Good afternoon. My name is Joe Bohr. I live at 1200 Beechcraft Road. Back in November at a public neighborhood meeting for the Dominion development, we became aware of the situation regarding the public easement along the south edge of our yards. Stephen had let us know that the city no longer had any interest in the easement and that we could do a vacation of right-of-way to purchase it from the city. As the adjoining property owners, we mow, maintain the property as part of our yards. We've done this for the 5 years that myself, have lived at our address, as the people before us done as well. We knew we didn't own the 15-foot easement, but we have maintained it as if we did own it. Since it was always thought of as a pedestrian walkway, we've taken the steps to maintain that original thought. The neighborhood was platted in 72. My house was built in 79. It was annexed by the city in 2012, and we bought our house in 2013. With the help of the city attorney, we've created, signed, and notarized a document to uphold the intent of the pedestrian walkway as our neighborhood covenant stated, even after we take our ownership. Do you guys have any questions?
Questions? I have a question. Why do you want to do this? I mean, you don't own the property. You're going to pay the city for property and then pay taxes on it?
We maintain it right now.
Right, I know, but what I'm saying is you're maintaining it, sure.
Just to protect the edge of our property, I suppose, for privacy reasons.
Because if we take it now, we don't have to deal with the new development that's coming in Dominion.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to get to. Why would, because if, barring anything else like that, if I owned it, I would say.
If it's a free grab, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, if we wait till they plat that out or plot it out or whatever, then we'd have to deal with every one of them along the way. There'd be like 6 or 8 lots along that area there.
Okay. Now that makes sense.
Privacy.
Any other questions?
Yeah,
Carl?
just thank you for taking care of this property for so long.
Yeah. All right, anything else?
Actually, my name's Steve Schald. I live at 1221 Beechcraft, across the street.
Okay.
Joe pretty well summed it up for us.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to testify on this item?
Thank you.
Next item, please.
All right, next is item 27, approving a master tax exempt lease purchase agreement and property schedule number 4 with U.S. Bancorp Government Leasing and Finance for wastewater treatment testing equipment in the amount of $161,970.
Anyone here to speak on this item? Okay. Well, next item, please.
All right, next is item 28, amending the pay schedule for LCEA A classifications to delete the classifications of senior engineering specialist and service desk manager, and amending the pay schedule for LCEA C classifications to delete the classifications of engineering specialist, emergency service call taker, ESD2 technology support, emergency service dispatcher 1, emergency service dispatcher 2, emergency service dispatcher 3, and service desk supervisor.
Good evening, Council. Doug McDaniel, Human Resources. All of these classes are vacant and no longer in use. This is purely cleanup to remove them from the rolls.
Okay, questions for Doug?
I noticed that a number of the positions were emergency dispatchers, and apparently from previous conversations with the council, we've we've been informed that it's difficult we have high turnover rates, so those are difficult positions to keep staffed. Will something about the changes you're making in the future, if not these deletions, help with that?
Not necessarily. We have already reorganized that area and put in place probably maybe a year and a half, 2 years ago, new classifications for public safety dispatchers. So they've already been replaced.
This is like cleanup?
Yes.
Okay.
The turnover that happens in a 24/7 operation that must be staffed is difficult in any 24/7 operation. So it's just a real challenge to defeat the turnover. It's a lifestyle issue.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, would anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
All right, next is item 29, amending the pay schedule for the employee group whose classifications are assigned to the pay range, which is prefixed by the letter E, by creating the classification of City Council Secretary.
Doug McDaniel, Human Resources. This new classification comes to you at your request to create a position for an incumbent in your area. We have created the classification of City Council Secretary and assigned the proposed pay range of E04, minimum salary of $21.25 to a maximum of $27.13.
That's bi-weekly, you're saying?
I'm sorry, sir?
The dollars you just said are bi-weekly, is that correct? Because it says 44,000.
That is an hourly rate.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Any questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anyone else like to testify on this item? Next item, please.
All right, that concludes our public hearing. We can move into the voting session.
Go for it.
Okay.
We will start with public hearing resolutions. Item 14 is the report of claims for the period of February 1st through the 15th, introduced by Gaylor Baird.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Larry and seconded by John. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Item 15 is the contract for Keno Type Lottery with EHPV Lottery Services, introduced by Gaylor Baird.
So moved.
Second?
Moved by Larry and seconded by Jane. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Item 16 is approving an amendment to the 48th and Layton Phase 1 redevelopment agreement, introduced by Gaylor Baird.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Larry and seconded by Cindy. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Item 17 is authorizing the mayor to execute contracts with energy service companies, introduced by Gaylor Baird.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Larry and seconded by Cindy. Discussion?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to put this on pending
Second.
with the public hearing.
With public hearing?
Yes, for,
Okay, put it on pending. Is that
We'll conti-
indefinite? Or continue testimony till next meeting?
no, it's,
Because there's
I think we
indefinite
need to
pending.
have some internal discussions with the administration, so.
Okay, do you want to give it a certain length of time?
No, I think
Indefinite pending.
indefinite pending.
Okay, is that seconded by Eugene?
Second.
Okay,
And I just think, if I may make a comment, that during the public hearing we had, there were a number of elements that I think through more discussion with the administration that we can come up with a viable way, because there is, I see the value in ESCOs, and it's just, we need to fine tune that, and I also think that there needs to be, the process needs to be tighter.
Cindy?
Yeah, I'd just like to ask city attorney a question. Thanks for coming up, Jeff. So in discussions, we've had a lot of discussions, an email and other things on these ESCOs up till this point. Is it the city attorney's position that the administration needs this resolution passed in order to go forward with the contract that's currently being considered with Schneider?
I want to call Chris up here just because I'm not involved in the drafting of that.
Okay.
But I would tell you that as I believe that the contract can be executed within a year. And if it can be executed within a year and the money is available through current appropriations, then it would not have to come back before this council. However, and Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, if the money is coming from internal financing, that would be money that has not been appropriated or budgeted by this council and could not be done without that portion of it coming back before the council.
Chris Connolly, City Law Department. Just correct. In terms of the financing mechanism, that has not been established yet for the installation portion. For the IGA, there was funding through the CIP. Is it necessary to adopt this resolution in order to execute the Schneider contract? The answer is no. That we can separately, independently, bring the Schneider contract. It wouldn't have necessarily all the guidance that we were looking for in here, which is why we brought it, because this is more of a policy statement. The Schneider contract is an actual contract, and we can bring that forward independently. If we feel, however, I would say that if, depending on how it's worded, if the administration wants to move forward with it as a less than 1 year contract, it probably could be structured that way, such that it's not a multi-year expenditure of funds. We've talked here, though, about bringing them to the council, so I expect that that's what we would still do. But in terms of the Schneider contract being dependent upon this resolution, the answer is no.
So you mentioned the funding, so if there was to be internal funding, it would have to come in front of us again anyway?
Correct, because there is not currently any method for funding that.
Okay, if the ESCO itself was going to finance, self-finance, would it have to come in front of us?
Yes, because there would still have to be some way to pay that back, and there's no mechanism that I'm aware of, that even if we wanted to use the ESCO financing to do that, it would be an incursion of debt. And that's not an option we've been considering.
Okay, so it would still be considered debt, but the state statute doesn't consider it indebtedness, is that right?
To be honest with you, I haven't looked at that part of it in a long time, so I don't remember how it reads on indebtedness.
But our interpretation, and again, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, our interpretation of that particular form of financing is it would clearly be a multi-year contract that would have to come before this council.
Correct, and we're still planning on doing it that way.
Okay, and if it was to be financed internally, it's not the multi-year contract, but rather the fact that the financing would be used from fund balances, and that hasn't been priorly approved before this council.
Yes. Right, that would be the main difference between the ESCO financing and the internal. The ESCO financing, as Jeff indicated, makes it a multi-year agreement. Therefore, that has to come no matter what. If there was a mechanism already in place to do the internal borrowing, then perhaps not, but that hasn't occurred yet. So either way, the Schneider contract has to come before the council.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions? We're discussing currently the motion to put on indefinite pending.
Right.
Well, I'm going to support this motion because I would like a little bit more development, working with the department, working with Frank, and working with Public Building Commission to get them on board and to have a dialogue with them on some of the customary, normal, routine capital improvements that they are working on that help increase energy efficiencies. And so once that discussion has happened, then I would like to establish the appropriate parameters on projects that are larger in scope that make more sense for going forward in doing the investment grade audits. And I think John has talked a little bit about that. Let's get our hands on the things that we have been doing in the course of normal maintenance, upgrades, and business with the Public Building Commission and have that dialogue, and then isolate projects that would make more sense.
Okay, other discussion on the motion to delay? Marion?
I would wonder if you could consider a date certain, just to not have something on indefinite pending. I don't think that serves us very well.
Jane, do you have an idea of how long it would take to get your,
I would think a month. I mean, I would be open to a month of discussion.
okay, so you're talking about the Monday, the 2nd of April. Is that correct?
God bless you.
Is that your birthday?
No, the young woman.
Well, since I'm only the seconder, I would say that seems reasonable.
What if we went to the 16th or something, just to give some time? Because I'm gonna be
Because
out
that
of
would
town
be,
Okay.
that would be
Six-
after Easter. I agree. I think
Okay.
that makes more sense, yeah.
So would you like to amend
there.
your,
I'd accept that amendment for the
To
date
the
certain of
16th,
April
date certain.
16th, public hearing continued.
and your
Yep.
second?
I agree.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, my question was pending. It was the same idea. Who can stop pending? How do we know when? And I think you've addressed that by picking a date. Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion on this is now to put it on pending, date certain, with testimony to April 16th.
Correct.
Does she have her hand up, or was she just preparing to write?
I think she's saying I got it right.
I just needed to make sure that I had the date
Okay,
written down correctly.
very good. Please call the roll.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Item 18 is the amendment to the mechanical systems permit fee schedule, introduced by Gaylor Baird.
So moved.
Moved by Lyrian, seconded by John. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Public hearing ordinance's second reading and related resolutions are item 19 through 29. Ordinance's third reading. Item 30 is text amendment 18001, amending section 27.63.630 of the Lincoln Municipal Code relating to indoor theaters, introduced by Eskridge.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Carl, seconded by John. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Item 31 is change of zone 17038, application of Brett Joseph for a change from R2 residential to RT residential transition at 6630 Star Street, introduced by Eskridge.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Carl, seconded by John. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Item 32, change of zone 17032, application of the Hellriches for a change from R2 residential with landmark district overlay to R2 residential district with individual landmark and landmark district overlay to designate the Seidel's House as a historic landmark at 2110 A Street, introduced by Eskridge.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Carl, seconded by John. Discussion? This is a good thing. Please call the roll.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge? Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0. Resolutions on first reading are items 33 through 36. Ordinances on first reading are items 37 through 41. Our pending list date certain are items 42 and 43. Our pending list, item 44, we have the request to withdraw.
I make a motion that we withdraw item 44.
Second.
Moved by Jane, seconded by Cindy. Discussion? Please call the roll.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
Mr. Chair, I move for adjournment.
By
Second.
John, seconded by Jane. Please call the roll.
Raybold?
Yes.
Schob?
Yes.
Camp?
Yes.
Christensen?
Yes.
Eskridge?
Yes.
Gaylor Baird?
Yes.
Lamb?
Yes.
Motion carried, 7-0.
We are adjourned.